The night sky over Metropolis held no stars. Ash clouds from 5 years past still drifted through the upper atmosphere, remnants of the day the city died. What remained of the Eastern District existed as a monument to failure, concrete husks jutting from irradiated soil streets, cracked into geometric patterns by heat that had turned sand to glass. A convoy of 3 armored vehicles rolled through the ruins. No headlights. The drivers navigated by thermal imaging, following routes mapped years ago, when cleanup crews still believed the crater could be reclaimed. They had stopped believing. Now they came only to enforce. The trucks halted at what had once been Lafayette Square. 12 soldiers disembarked, their movements efficient and silent. They wore no insignia. The regime had fallen 2 years prior, but its machinery continued to function. Some laws required no government to enforce them. Some executions needed no trial. 7 civilians knelt in the ash hands, bound behind their backs with polymer restraints. They had been caught distributing pamphlets in the resettlement zones. The pamphlets asked questions about accountability, about justice, about whether Superman's surrender meant the world had truly changed. The questions were sedition. The punishment was certain. One soldier activated a drone. It rose 15 feet, Rotor's barely audible camera lens sweeping across the kneeling figures. This would be broadcast to specific channels, not as news, as reminder. The regime might be gone, but its lessons remained. The squad leader raised his hand. 7 rifles aligned with 7 heads. Then the floodlights died. The truck's engines cut out simultaneously. The drone dropped from the sky, its rotors spinning uselessly as if the air itself had stopped supporting flight. It hit the ground with a sound like breaking teeth. The soldier's night vision flickered, died, flickered again. In the strobing green darkness, one man noticed something wrong with the civilians. Their shadows had vanished, not obscured by the failing light. Gone. The ash beneath them showed no darkened outline, no trace that bodies blocked the moon. The squad leader opened his mouth to give an order. His voice died in his throat. His own shadow moved. It peeled from the ground like wet paper, rising against gravity, against sense, against every law that kept the world comprehensible. The shadow stretched upward, elongating into a shape that resembled its caster, but differed in crucial ways. The proportions were wrong. The angles too sharp. The shadow's hand closed around the soldier's ankle. He tried to scream. The sound emerged as a wet gasp. His legs buckled. He dropped to his knees, then to his side, then stopped moving entirely. No blood. No visible wound. Just a man who had been standing and now was not. The other soldiers opened fire. Muzzle flashes lit the square in stuttering bursts. Bullets hit ash, hit concrete, hit the bodies of their own squad mates as the shadows moved faster than human reflexes could track. One by one, the soldiers fell. Some fired until their magazines emptied. Others dropped their weapons and ran. None made it more than 10 steps. The 7 bound civilians remained kneeling untouched. Their shadows had returned. Around them, 12 bodies lay in the ash, positioned with eerie precision, as if something had arranged them for inspection. The convoy's comm system crackled. Not the familiar hiss of static, but something colder. A frequency that made the speakers rattle in their casings, then silence. One of the civilians, a woman in her 40s with ash-gray hair, turned her head slowly. She looked at the bodies, at the shadows pooling beneath them in ways shadows should not pool, at the darkness between the ruined buildings that seemed deeper than absence of light should allow. She did not understand what had saved them. She understood only that the world had changed again in a direction no one had predicted. 300 miles away, in a bunker beneath what remained of Gotham, a screen flickered to life. The display showed a map of Metropolis overlaid with dozens of monitoring points. Most were dark. A few showed amber. One pulsed red. Text scrolled across the bottom of the screen in sans serif font, each character appearing with mechanical precision. Brother I, Afterlife, Anomaly Detected Location, Metropolis Crater Grid, Epsilon 7. Threat Classification, Unknown. Soul Signatures, 12 Terminated Cause of Death. Null Recommended Action, Immediate Containment. The text paused. A new line appeared. Historical Precedent. Non-comparative analysis, insufficient data, probability of conventional countermeasure success, 0.03%. The screen went dark. In the silence that followed, something in the bunker's ventilation system made a sound like drawn breath. The air grew colder by 3 degrees. The temperature sensors recorded the change, but could not explain it. In the Metropolis crater, the woman with ash-gray hair felt the restraints around her wrists loosen. Not cut, not broken, simply no longer relevant. She stood slowly, helping the others to their feet. They did not speak. There were no words for what had occurred. Above them, the ash clouds continued their eternal drift. Below them, 12 shadows lay pooled in shapes that resembled men, but were not men. And in the spaces between the ruins, in the gaps, where moonlight failed to reach something, waited with the patience of a thing that had learned to measure time in civilizations rather than heartbeats. The war had not ended when Superman surrendered. It had only changed form. And now, it was about to change again. The bodies in the ash would be discovered at dawn. By then, the shadows would be gone. The survivors would tell their story to anyone who would listen. But their words would sound like madness or propaganda or desperate fiction. Some would believe, most would not. It would not matter. Belief was not required. The anomaly had arrived. The framework had been breached. And somewhere in the dark, a presence that understood both death and sovereignty had begun to take inventory of a world that had forgotten the difference between order and peace. The counting had begun. The Batcave had not been silent in years. Even in the depths of Gotham's bedrock, the hum of servers and the distant rumble of the city above provided constant low-frequency noise. But when the alert came through at 0347 hours, the quality of silence changed. It became the kind of quiet that preceded structural failure. Bruce Wayne stood before the primary console, still wearing the cowl, but with the cape discarded across a workbench. His fingers moved across haptic controls, pulling up surveillance logs from the Metropolis crater. Victor Stone materialized beside him, half his face catching the blue glow of the monitors, the other half reflecting nothing. "The system flagged it 2 hours ago," Cyborg said. His voice carried the flatness of someone reporting a catastrophe they had already processed. 12 terminated. No conventional cause. Brother Eye's running probability matrices and coming up blank. Batman did not respond immediately. He expanded the footage from the drone, watching the final 30 seconds before the device failed. The timestamp showed 0143 hours. In those 30 seconds, shadows moved in ways that violated 3 fundamental laws of physics and one theological principle he had spent a decade trying to forget. "Play it again." His voice emerged rough from hours without speaking. Frame by frame, the footage crawled forward. A soldier's shadow detached from the ground at frame 847. By frame 851, the shadow had achieved vertical orientation. By frame 855, it had made contact with its source. The soldier collapsed at frame 862. Total elapsed time 0.47 seconds. "Energy signature?" Batman asked. "None. No radiation spike, no electromagnetic distortion, no quantum displacement. Whatever did this, it's not in our database." Cyborg pulled up a secondary screen showing waveform analysis. "I ran it against every meta-human incident from the past decade. Nothing matches." Batman's jaw tightened beneath the cowl. He reached past Cyborg and entered a command sequence most systems would not recognize. The main screen flickered, then displayed an interface that had not been active since the regime's final days. Angular text appeared in the upper left corner. Brother I-Core Archive. Status dormant monitoring. Last. External access. 7:39 days ago. You kept it running, Cyborg said. Not an accusation, a statement of fact. Contingencies don't retire. Batman navigated through layers of archived data, searching for patterns the automated systems might have missed. After Brainiac's invasion, we purged his control protocols. Grid tried to stop us. We thought we succeeded. The screen populated with incident reports. Most were routine. A few showed anomalies that Brother I had flagged, but not classified. Small things. Surveillance gaps lasting fractions of a second. Temperature drops in sealed environments. Biometric readings that registered as human, but failed secondary verification. All of them clustered around one location. Metropolis Crater. All within the past 96 hours. It's been building, Batman said quietly. We just weren't watching the right indicators. Cyborg moved to a different console, his mechanical eye projecting data streams into the air. I'm pulling the logs from when we liberated the cave. When we cut Brainiac's connection. His fingers paused over the haptic surface. Bruce, you need to see this. The projection showed archived footage from 26 months prior. Cyborg's team breaching the cave's outer defenses, Grid attempting to lock them out. Catwoman disabling secondary firewalls, while Harley provided enthusiastic tactical support. And in the background, barely visible in the camera's periphery, Brother Eye's central processor displaying a message. Not disconnected, absorbed neural architecture integrated. That's Brainiac's syntax, Cyborg said. We thought we were reading residual code, a ghost in the system. Batman's hands stilled on the controls. The implications assembled themselves with brutal efficiency. They had not severed Brainiac's connection. They had interrupted it. And when a being that cataloged civilizations made contact with a surveillance system designed to monitor gods, the result would not be clean separation. It would be contamination. Bring up Brainiac's final transmission, Batman said, before Superman destroyed his ship. Cyborg hesitated, then complied. Audio filled the cave, the voice synthesized and cold, carrying the absolute certainty of something that had consumed 1,000 worlds. You cannot regain control. Over the past days, Brother I has been absorbed into my neural network. It is now an extension of my mind. The recording ended. Neither man spoke for 3 seconds. He didn't mean temporary control, Cyborg said. He meant permanent integration. Even after we killed the ship, the connection remained. Brother I still carries part of him. Batman pulled up the Metropolis incident again, overlaying it with Brother Eye's anomaly detection patterns. The system had not identified a threat. It had identified something it recognized, something that resonated with the fragment of Brainiac still embedded in its code. It's not scanning for danger, Batman said. It's scanning for data. Brainiac collected civilizations. He cataloged extinction events, technological singularities, evolutionary dead ends. And when Brother I detected something in that crater, it didn't flag a threat. It flagged a discovery, Cyborg finished. Batman entered another command. The screen displayed a three-dimensional map of Metropolis, overlaid with probability fields and energy distribution patterns. Most of the craters showed standard background radiation. But at the center where the nuke had detonated 5 years ago, where 7 million people had died in a flash of light and fury, the readings showed something impossible. Negative space. Not absence of data. Active negation. As if something had reached into the fabric of recorded reality and excised a section. We need Constantine, Batman said. He's not going to like this. No one's going to like this. Cyborg initiated the call. The projection flickered, resolving into the image of a man in a rumpled trench coat, cigarette dangling from his lips, standing in what appeared to be a London alleyway. John Constantine looked at them with the expression of someone who had been expecting bad news and was disappointed to be proven right. Bat, Tin Man. He took a drag from the cigarette. Let me guess. Something's dead that shouldn't be, or something's alive that shouldn't be, and you need the poor bastard who deals with the in-between to sort it. Metropolis, Batman said. 12 dead. No cause. Shadows moving independently of their sources. Constantine's expression shifted. The casual cynicism dropped away, replaced by something sharper. He took the cigarette from his mouth and dropped it, grinding it under his heel with more force than necessary. Shadows with agency. That's not metahuman. That's not magic, not in the way you're thinking. He moved closer to whatever camera was capturing his image. That's sovereignty. Someone with admin rights over death itself. Explain, Batman said. The way most people die, there's a process. Body stops, soul moves on natural order, continues. What you're describing is someone stepping into that process and saying, "No, you work for me now." It's not killing, it's claiming. Constantine's jaw tightened. This isn't hell making a play. This is something that treats death like a resource. Cyborg pulled up the footage again, sending it to Constantine's device. They watched in silence as the shadows rose and fell. Bloody hell, Constantine muttered. That's clean work. No summoning circle, no contract, no bargaining, just authority. He looked up at them. Whatever's in that crater, it's not from around here. And I don't mean another planet. I mean another framework entirely. Can you close it? Batman asked. Constantine laughed, the sound brittle and sharp. Close it, mate. I don't even know what it is yet. But if you're asking whether we can shove it back through whatever hole it crawled out of. He paused. We can try. But if this thing has the juice to overwrite natural law, closing doors might not be its weakness. We leave in 20 minutes, Batman said. Metropolis crater, grid coordinates attached. Course we do. Constantine's image flickered. One question before I pack my bag of tricks. The people who died. The 12 soldiers. Brother I said cause of death was null. Did it register them as dead? Cyborg checked the data. His expression shifted. No. Status shows terminated but not deceased. Like the system couldn't categorize what happened to them. Right. Constantine lit another cigarette. So they're not dead. They're just not alive in a way the system recognizes anymore. Which means whatever took them didn't kill them. It converted them. He exhaled smoke. I'll meet you there. And Bat, bring the good toys. If this goes sideways, we'll need more than batarangs and hope. The transmission ended. Batman stood in the blue glow of the monitors, watching the Metropolis footage loop for the 7th time. The shadows rose. The soldiers fell. The civilians remained untouched, kneeling in the ash, as if some intelligence had made a deliberate choice about who deserved mercy. Contingencies, he said quietly. Already running scenarios, Cyborg replied. None of them look good. They never do. Batman reached for the cowl's temple controls, activating the Batmobile's remote start sequence. Above them, in the manor, Alfred would be preparing field equipment without being asked. Some protocols required no instruction. The cave's lighting shifted to tactical red. Somewhere in the shadows, weapon systems hummed to standby status. The war had ended. Then it had restarted. Then it had ended again. Now something else was beginning. And this time the enemy was not a fallen god or a broken ideal. It was something that looked at death and saw opportunity. The drive to Metropolis would take 90 minutes. Batman estimated they had less time than that before whatever had claimed those 12 soldiers decided to expand its territory. He had fought aliens and monsters and men who believed themselves beyond judgment. He had never fought something that could rewrite the rules death itself followed. There was no contingency for that. but he would build one anyway. The Batmobile's engine roared to life in the depths below. Batman moved toward it, cape restored, tools checked, mind already 3 steps ahead into scenarios that ended badly and plans that might delay the inevitable. Behind him, Brother Eye's screens continued their silent monitoring. Somewhere in the code, a fragment of Brainiac's intelligence processed the data, comparing it against archives of 1,000 dead worlds. And deep in those archives, in a file flagged with the highest priority classification, a single word appeared: monarchy. The system did not understand the term. It only knew that every civilization that had encountered it had ceased transmission shortly after. The counting continued. The metropolis crater looked different at dawn. Ash caught the light and turned the landscape into something that resembled snow if you did not look closely. Batman stood at the crater's edge, surveying the eastern district through thermal imaging. Cyborg scanned for energy signatures. Constantine drew symbols in the dirt with a piece of charcoal, muttering in a language that predated Latin. The bodies had been removed an hour before their arrival. Not by official channels. The survivors had carried their dead into one of the ruined buildings and covered them with sheets of corrugated metal. An improvised morgue. An act of defiance against the cleanup crews, who would incinerate remains without ceremony. "Readings clean," Cyborg reported. "No radiation spike, no EM distortion. Whatever happened here left no conventional trace." Constantine finished his circle and stepped back, studying the symbols with narrowed eyes. "That's the problem, isn't it? No trace means it's not playing by rules we recognize." He pulled out a hip flask, took a drink, then poured a measure onto the ground. Old gods require offerings. New gods require belief. This doesn't require anything. It just is. Batman moved toward the square where the incident occurred. Scorch marks from muzzle flashes still darkened the concrete. Shell casings glittered in the ash. The scene told a story of panic and overwhelming force. But the force itself had left no evidence of its passage. "The survivors," Batman said. "Where are they?" "Scattered," Cyborg replied, accessing local network traffic. "They're not talking to authorities. Can't blame them. As far as the system's concerned, this never happened." Constantine crouched at the center of the square, running his fingers through the ash. His expression shifted. "There's a cold spot here, not temperature. Something deeper." He stood abruptly, wiping his hands on his coat. "This is a threshold, a place where the wall between here and somewhere else got thin enough to breach." "Can you seal it?" Batman asked. "I can try. But sealing assumes it wants to be sealed. Assumes it's a passive tear and not." Constantine stopped mid-sentence, his gaze fixed on a point 30 feet away, near the collapsed entrance of what had been a library. Batman followed his line of sight and saw nothing. Cyborg's sensors registered nothing. But Constantine's hand moved to his pocket fingers, closing around something that clinked softly. "We're not alone," Constantine said quietly. The man appeared without ceremony. One moment the space near the library entrance held only rubble and shadow. The next he stood there as if he had always been present and they had simply failed to notice. Tall, lean frame, dark hair that absorbed the early light. He wore a long coat that seemed to drink in the surrounding dimness, its edges blurring slightly as if the fabric existed partially in another state. His eyes were the color of ash and old iron. They registered the 3 of them with the same attention someone might give to pieces on a board evaluating position and potential. "Who turned this place into a graveyard?" His voice carried no accent, no inflection, a statement of inquiry that expected answer. Batman's hand moved toward his belt. Cyborg's arm reconfigured energy building in the cannon aperture. Constantine remained still, but his breathing had changed rhythm. "You need to identify yourself," Batman said. His voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to receiving compliance. "This is a restricted zone." The man's gaze shifted to Batman, then to the square behind him, then back. restricted. By whose authority? The government that allowed this? The hero who failed to prevent it, or the system still pretending it has control? The words held no malice. They were observations delivered with the precision of a surgeon identifying failed organs. Answer the question, Batman said. Who are you? Someone who recognizes a war that hasn't ended. The man took 3 steps forward, moving with economy that suggested either trained discipline or something beyond the need for efficiency. The people here, the ones you're trying to save, they're not in danger from me. Constantine spoke, his voice careful. But someone was. 12 dead in one night. Clean kills. No evidence. Shadows with minds of their own. He tilted his head. That's your work, isn't it? The man stopped walking. His attention focused on Constantine with new interest. You understand what you saw. I understand someone stepped into the natural order and rewrote the rules. I understand those soldiers aren't dead in any way the universe recognizes. Constantine's jaw tightened. I understand you're not from here, not this Earth. Maybe not this framework at all. Your understanding is better than most. The man looked past them toward the center of the crater, where Ground Zero remained a scar of fused glass. This city died because someone made a choice. Then more people died because someone else made choices in response. The war that followed called itself justice. It was escalation with better branding. Batman moved slightly, angling to cut off potential exit vectors. You didn't answer his question. Are you responsible for the 12 dead? No. The man's gaze returned to Batman. I'm responsible for ending the threat they represented. The distinction matters. Cyborg's sensors flared. I'm not reading him. Thermal shows human baseline, but everything else... He paused. It's like scanning a hole in the data. The man's attention shifted to Cyborg. Your systems are looking for energy signatures, quantum displacement, dimensional breach. You won't find them. I'm not displacing anything. I'm simply here. That's not an answer, Batman said. How did you arrive? Where did you come from? For the first time, something almost resembling expression crossed the man's features. Not quite amusement, more like recognition of an irrelevant question. I came through the hole your surveillance system made when it tried to catalog the dead. Brother Eye scanning for soul data created resonance. The resonance created a door. I walked through it. Constantine swore under his breath. Brainiac's integration. The bastard left a back door. Not a back door. A beacon. The man's eyes held no judgment, only statement. Systems that try to quantify death eventually call to those who administer it. Batman's tactical computer ran probability assessments, each scenario returning unacceptable variables. You're saying Brother Eye summoned you. I'm saying it created conditions where my presence became possible. Whether I answered was my choice, and you chose to come. Batman's voice remained level. Why? The man turned, looking toward the crater's western edge, where the first reconstruction efforts had failed 3 years prior. Because this world is still at war. The combatants changed. The rhetoric evolved. But the mechanism remains identical. Power contested by power, each side certain their violence serves justice. He moved toward the crater's edge. Batman, Cyborg, and Constantine followed, maintaining tactical spacing without conscious coordination. You can return, Batman said. Whatever door you used, it works both directions. The man stopped at the precipice where ground sloped down into the glassed center. He crouched, placing one hand flat against the fused earth. Around his fingers, shadow pooled despite the morning sun. Not cast darkness. Substantial darkness like ink spreading through water. I can. His voice held no uncertainty. I'm choosing not to. Constantine pulled out a crystal etched with protective sigils. He began a low chant, words in Enochian, that made the air taste of copper. The symbols flared blue-white, forming a containment perimeter around the man. The darkness at the man's fingertips expanded, touching the perimeter's edge. The blue-white light flickered, died. The crystal in Constantine's hand cracked down its center. "Bloody fucking hell," Constantine whispered, staring at the ruined focus. The man stood. The darkness receded, flowing back into shadows that should not exist in direct sunlight. "Your magic asks the universe to change its rules temporarily. I am the rule. There's nothing to ask." Batman activated a compressed explosive charge, the kind designed for breaching reinforced bunkers. "Last warning. Stand down, or we contain you by force." The man looked at Batman, at Cyborg, at Constantine, still clutching a broken crystal. When he spoke, his voice carried no threat, no posturing, only certainty. "You can't contain what refuses to be limited by your framework." He reached toward the space where Constantine's perimeter had been. The air rippled, reality folding at the point of contact. For 3 seconds, they glimpsed something beyond the fold. Darkness that held structure. Void that contained purpose. A place where death was not an ending, but a transformation. Then the man closed his hand, and the rift sealed as cleanly as if it had never existed. "I don't need force," he said. "I need you to understand what's happening here." Far above them, beyond the ash clouds and the morning light, something vast turned its attention toward the crater. Not physical sight, not divine judgment. Something between the two. An awareness that evaluated and measured and chose not to intervene. Not yet. The sensation passed like pressure equalizing after a storm. Constantine felt it. His expression shifted from defensive calculation to wary recognition. Something just looked at us, something old enough to make angels seem young. "It measured," the man said. "It found the situation unresolved. It chose to observe rather than act." His tone suggested this was expected. "Your universe has entities that maintain balance. They're not my concern unless they interfere." Batman's mind worked through scenarios, discarding options as they failed probability tests. "What is your concern?" The man gestured toward the crater. "This. All of this. A world that tears itself apart because no one has the will to actually end the cycle. You had a war. Superman lost. The system claims normalcy returned, but the infrastructure of that war remains functional. The weapons still exist. The grudges still fester. You're not at peace. You're at intermission. And you're here to what?" Cyborg's arm cannon remained active, but no longer aimed directly. "End it for us." "No, you'll end it yourselves one way or another. I'm here to make sure when you do, the war doesn't become eternal." The man's eyes held the emptiness of someone who had seen civilizations collapse under the weight of their own convictions. "I've watched wars that lasted millennia, because both sides believed stopping meant surrender. I've seen planets burn because compromise felt like defeat. Your world is trending that direction." "You're not a hero," Batman said. It was not a question. "No." "Not a conqueror." "No." "Then what are you?" The man turned to face them fully. The morning sun caught his profile, and for a moment, shadow and light seemed to argue over which had claim. The shadow won. "I'm the one who carries it away. All of it. The violence, the escalation, the certainty that your enemy deserves destruction. I don't judge whether you're right. I don't care about your justifications. I only care that it ends." Constantine laughed, the sound sharp and mirthless. "You're a sin-eater, a cosmic bloody janitor. You consume the war so the world doesn't have to." Crude, but functionally accurate. Batman's tactical assessment shifted. Not an enemy, not an ally. A third category that his contingency protocols had no framework to address. The 12 soldiers. You didn't kill them. I converted them. They were tools of a system built to maintain suppression. That system no longer owns them. I do. That's not better, Cyborg said. That's slavery. They have no will to enslave. They ended when they chose violence against the defenseless. What remains serves a function. Whether you call that slavery depends on whether you believe the dead have rights. The man's expression remained neutral. I don't expect you to approve. I expect you to understand the alternative was letting that pattern continue. Batman's jaw tightened beneath the cowl. Every instinct trained over decades screamed warnings. Unknown entity. Demonstrated power over fundamental forces. No clear motivation, no exploitable weakness. Threat level undetermined but catastrophically high. Why tell us any of this? Batman asked. You could have stayed hidden, operated without revealing yourself, because you'll respond to my presence. Your systems are already flagging anomalies. Brother Eye is processing data it can't categorize. Eventually, Superman will hear about a threat in Metropolis. Wonder Woman will decide it requires warrior's judgment. You'll mobilize, escalate, repeat the pattern. The man's eyes held something that might have been weariness. I'm telling you because the next phase is inevitable. I'd prefer you understood it wasn't personal. Constantine stepped forward, broken crystal forgotten. Next phase, what the hell does that mean? Before the man could answer, Cyborg's sensors screamed alert. Energy signature incoming, velocity supersonic. Trajectory locked on their position. He's here, Cyborg said. Superman, ETA 12 seconds. The man looked skyward, tracking something invisible to normal sight. Faster than expected. Good. Better to establish parameters early. Parameters. Batman moved into defensive formation, every weapon system primed. What parameters? The man's shadow spread across the ground, defying the sun's angle, stretching toward the crater's center. Where it touched, darkness pooled. Where darkness pooled, shapes began to rise. Whether this world can accept that some wars don't end in victory. They end in exhaustion. Or absorption. His voice carried no threat, no eagerness. Only the flat certainty of someone stating mechanical fact. He's coming to enforce order. I'm here to demonstrate why order maintained by force is just war wearing different rhetoric. The shapes in the shadows resolved into forms. Human-shaped, but wrong. Too still, too patient. Waiting for instruction with the discipline of soldiers who had transcended the need for doubt. Constantine grabbed Batman's arm. We need to move, now. This is about to become a pissing contest between gods, and we're standing at ground zero. But Batman didn't move. He watched the man who claimed to carry wars away, watched the shadows take shape, watched the sky where Superman would arrive in seconds, with all the righteous fury of someone who had learned to equate power with responsibility. You said you're not here to conquer, Batman said. Prove it. Stand down before he arrives. Let us manage this diplomatically. The man looked at him. For the first time, something resembling genuine expression crossed his features, not sympathy. Acknowledgement. Diplomacy requires mutual recognition of authority. He doesn't recognize any authority except his own. That's the problem I'm here to solve. The sky tore open with sound. Superman descended like Judgment Cape, billowing eyes, already glowing with heat vision, ready to deploy. He landed hard enough to crack the fused glass beneath his boots, his gaze locked on the man in the dark coat. You have 3 seconds. Superman said, voice carrying the absolute certainty of someone who had stopped measuring threats in conventional terms. Identify yourself and surrender, or I will make you. The man met Superman's stare with no visible reaction. No fear, no defiance. Just the calm of someone who had already calculated outcomes and found all variables acceptable. No, he said simply. Constantine pulled Batman back. Cyborg raised shields. The shadows around the man's feet deepened, and somewhere in that darkness, 12 shapes stood ready. The war had found a new participant. one who had no interest in winning, only in ending it. Superman stood 20 feet from the stranger. Fists clenched at his sides, the air around him warping with barely restrained power. The Metropolis crater had seen destruction before. It remembered the nuke, the fires, the screams that had echoed across dimensions. Now, it prepared to remember something else. "I don't repeat myself," Superman said. His voice carried across the ruins with the weight of absolute conviction. "You've demonstrated hostile capability. You've interfered with lawful operations. You will submit to questioning or you will be neutralized." The man in the dark coat remained motionless. His expression held the same neutrality as before, as if Superman's threat carried no more weight than a weather report. Behind him, shadows continued to pool in defiance of the morning sun's geometry. Batman's hand moved to his belt. Tactical analysis ran through scenarios, each concluding with unacceptable collateral damage. "Clark, stand down. We're still assessing the situation." "I've assessed enough." Superman's eyes flared brighter heat building behind the irises. "Metropolis has seen enough death. I won't allow another threat to take root here." Constantine muttered something that might have been a prayer or a curse. His hand clutched at remaining protective charms, though the broken crystal in his pocket served as clear evidence of their probable effectiveness. "Bloody hell. Here we go." The stranger tilted his head slightly, studying Superman with the detached interest of a surgeon examining a familiar pathology. "You believe force is measurement. That power demonstrated equals authority earned. That's why this world stays broken. I believe in protecting people from things they can't protect themselves from." Superman's cape lifted in a wind that existed only around him, heat displacing air in visible waves. "Whatever you are, wherever you came from, you've already killed 12 people. That ends now. I ended 12 threats. The distinction, there is no distinction." Superman moved forward, closing half the distance in a blur that left after images. "You don't get to decide who lives and dies. Not here. Not in my world." The stranger's eyes narrowed fractionally. "Your world?" That phrasing reveals everything. Superman's patience, already strained by years of impossible choices and Pyrrhic victories, shattered. He accelerated, crossing the remaining space faster than sound could follow, fist drawn back to deliver a blow that would crack tank armor. The stranger didn't dodge. Darkness erupted from the ground beneath him. A curtain of tangible shadow that swallowed light and transformed the morning into artificial twilight. Superman's punch hit the shadow barrier and stopped. Not deflected. Stopped, as if the space itself had achieved density that denied passage. "What?" Superman pulled back, heat vision lancing through the darkness. The beams cut paths through shadow, but illuminated nothing beyond. The stranger had vanished into the black. Then the ground beneath Superman shifted. Not earthquake, not tectonic movement. The shadows pooled under his boots, gained substance, texture, weight. They pulled at his feet with force that measured itself against Kryptonian muscle and found the exchange acceptable. Superman tore free, ascending 20 feet in a burst of speed, looking down at a battlefield that had transformed in seconds. The crater's floor had become a sea of darkness, not absence of light, presence of something else. And from that sea, shapes emerged. They rose without sound, without ceremony. Human forms, but wrong in ways that bypassed rational analysis and triggered primal recognition. Soldiers in dark armor that drank illumination. Their movements held military precision, but lacked the inefficiency of living muscle. They formed ranks with the discipline of an army that had transcended the need for drill instructors. Batman counted quickly. 30, 40, they're still coming. Cyborg's sensors struggled to process what they registered. Energy readings are inverted. They're not generating heat or EM signatures. They're absorbing ambient energy from the environment. His voice tightened. Bruce, they're not alive. But they're not dead either. There's something else. Constantine had gone pale. Shadow soldiers. Actual bloody shadow soldiers. Not metaphor. Not magic constructs. Sovereign authority over death itself. Made manifest. He grabbed Batman's arm hard enough to bruise. We need to leave. Now. This isn't a fight. It's a statement. Superman hovered above the shadow army, calculating angles of attack. His tactical mind, honed through decades of impossible battles, recognized the formation's purpose immediately. They weren't positioned to assault. They were positioned to control space, deny movement force, specific responses. Illusions. Superman said, though his tone suggested he didn't believe it. Projections designed to intimidate. He dove, heat vision blazing, targeting the nearest cluster of shadow soldiers. The beam struck true, burning through where hearts and lungs would exist in living targets. The soldiers didn't fall. They didn't react. They simply continued their advanced formations, shifting to account for Superman's position with the fluidity of water responding to obstacles. Superman landed among them, moving faster than human perception could track. Fists that could shatter mountains struck shadow-clad bodies. Some crumpled, some scattered like smoke. But for each one destroyed the darkness spawned two more. And the ones he'd already engaged reformed behind him, rising from the sea of black, as if destruction was merely temporary inconvenience. You're not fighting soldiers. The stranger's voice emerged from everywhere and nowhere, echoing through the shadow field with perfect clarity. You're fighting attrition, duration, the mechanism that turns overwhelming power into exhausted futility. Superman spun, tracking the voice heat vision sweeping in arcs that should have illuminated the source. They revealed only more shadows, more soldiers, more darkness that swallowed his efforts like ocean accepting rain. Show yourself. Superman's shout carried frustration he rarely allowed to surface. Fight me directly instead of hiding behind pawns. I am fighting you. The stranger materialized 30 feet away, standing atop a ridge of rubble coat, moving in a breeze that touched nothing else. You're just not accustomed to opponents who don't meet force with force. You want collision, impact, a moment of overwhelming power that decides outcomes. I'm giving you process instead. System. War as it actually functions when stripped of heroic pretense. Superman launched himself at the stranger, accelerating to speeds that turned air into plasma. The stranger didn't move, didn't flinch. At the last possible instant, before impact's shadow erupted between them. Not a barrier this time, a redirection. Superman's trajectory bent twisted by invisible force that felt like gravity rotated 90 degrees. He shot past the stranger, momentum unchanged, but vector-altered, slamming into the crater wall hard enough to leave an impact crater within the larger crater. Concrete dust settled. Superman emerged, cape-torn, uniform scuffed, but body undamaged. His eyes burned with heat that could melt steel. I've fought gods, Superman said, rising into the air once more. I've fought beings that could reshape reality. You're not the first to think overwhelming me was possible. I don't want to overwhelm you. The stranger's voice remained level factual. I want you to understand what you're attempting. You're trying to force submission through superior power. I'm demonstrating why that approach fails against an opponent who measures success in different terms. The shadow soldiers shifted formation. They spread across the crater's floor in a pattern Batman recognized from military textbooks. Encirclement, area denial, layers of redundancy that ensured no single breakthrough could collapse the whole structure. Cyborg, Batman said quietly. Analysis. What's the actual composition of those soldiers? Cyborg's processors worked through data that violated multiple fundamental constants. They're solid shadow. I know how that sounds. but they're manifesting physical presence without corresponding mass. Striking them produces kinetic results, but destroying them doesn't eliminate the material. It just redistributes. He paused. Bruce, this isn't technology. It's not magic. It's something else. Something that treats physical law like suggestion rather than rule. Constantine had stopped trying to construct protective circles. Instead, he watched the stranger with the expression of someone recognizing a phenomenon from old texts, that had been dismissed as mythology. He's not from a different planet. He's from a different cosmological framework. One where death has a king instead of a concept, where sovereignty over the deceased is literal rather than metaphorical. That's impossible, Batman said. So's a man who flies by thinking hard about it. Constantine pulled out a cigarette with shaking hands. We're 3 inches past impossible and accelerating toward myth was warning all along. Superman attacked again and again. Each assault demonstrated new tactics, different approaches. Heat vision to scatter shadows. Freeze breath to halt their advance. Thunderclap shockwaves to disperse formations. Every technique Superman had developed across decades of impossible victories found deployment. The Shadow Soldiers adapted. When heat vision proved effective, they shifted to formations that minimized exposure. When cold slowed them, they altered density to resist temperature change. When shock waves scattered them, they reformed faster, tighter, more efficiently. You're teaching them, the stranger observed. He had not moved from his position on the rubble ridge. Every attack provides data. Every technique demonstrates preference. You're not overcoming opposition. You're training it. Superman landed hard, breathing heavier than combat should require. Not from exertion. From the creeping realization that conventional victory conditions didn't apply. He had fought for 15 minutes. The Shadow Army had grown larger. What do you want? Superman's voice carried the edge of someone accustomed to negotiating from strength, now forced to ask questions. If this is about making a point, you've made it. Stand down and we can discuss terms. I want nothing from you. The stranger descended from the ridge, walking through the Shadow Army that parted before him like subjects acknowledging a sovereign. You want submission, compliance, order enforced through superior capability. Those desires are your prison, not my objective. He stopped 10 feet from Superman. The shadows stilled. The crater fell silent except for distant wind moving through ruined buildings. I'm not your enemy, the stranger said. I'm the consequence of building a world where force determines legitimacy, where power concentrates until it collapses under its own contradictions. You wanted to protect a people by becoming unchallengeable. You succeeded. And now challenge has arrived in a form that doesn't care about your power. Only about whether that power serves war or conclusion. Superman's fists clenched. I ended a war. The regime fell. The world is healing. The infrastructure of that war remains intact. Brother Eye still monitors. Weapons still exist in stockpiles. Grudges still fester in shadows. You ended one configuration of violence and called it peace. I'm here to ensure when the next configuration emerges, it doesn't become eternal. By doing what? Superman's voice rose. Killing, converting people into your Shadow Army. How is that different from what you're accusing me of? I don't claim righteousness. You do. That's the difference? The stranger's eyes held no judgment, no superiority, only statement of observed fact. You killed because you believed it served justice. I end threats because allowing them to continue feeds escalation. Your actions required moral framework to justify. Mine require only recognition that some patterns must break or they consume everything. Batman's tactical computer finally produced assessment. Threat level incalculable. Weakness unknown. Probability of conventional victory approaching 0. Recommended action, strategic withdrawal and reevaluation. He ignored the recommendation. If you're not here to conquer or destroy, what's your endgame? What happens when you've ended all the wars? The stranger looked at Batman. For the first time, something almost resembling acknowledgement crossed his features. I returned to watching, to waiting for the next world that builds tyranny and calls it peace. But that's not your concern. Your concern is what happens in the next hour. What happens in the next hour? Superman demanded. Others hear about this. Wonder Woman decides warrior response is appropriate. More combatants arrive. The cycle you claim to have ended restarts with new players and old patterns. The stranger gestured at the shadow army surrounding them. I demonstrate that escalation produces diminishing returns. That power measured in destructive capacity fails against opponents who treat destruction as resource rather than threat. Constantine spoke up, voice hoarse. Those 12 soldiers, the ones you converted, they were just the beginning, weren't they? You're building an army from this world's violence. I'm accepting what this world produces. Every death in service of perpetuating conflict. Every casualty of systems built on domination. They serve a function now, instead of feeding cycles that never conclude. The stranger's tone carried no pride, no satisfaction. You find it horrifying. I find it necessary. The gap between those positions is why this conversation has no diplomatic resolution. Superman took a step forward. Heat built behind his eyes again, but he held it in check. I'm giving you one more chance. Leave. Return through whatever door you used to arrive, or I will find a way to make you leave. Whatever it takes. No. The stranger's response held the simplicity of fundamental truth. You won't. Because making me leave requires escalation beyond what this city can survive. You know that. Your tactical assessment has already concluded that victory costs more than you're willing to pay. So now you face the question you've avoided since the regime fell. What question? Whether you fight because you can win, or because fighting is all you know how to do. The words landed like physical blows. Superman's expression hardened. Batman saw the shift, recognized the moment where conversation ended and commitment began. He'd seen it before, in Gotham's worst nights, in the eyes of criminals who decided prison was preferable to surrender, in his own mirror more often than he wanted to acknowledge. Clark, Batman said quietly, stand down. We need to regroup, assess, approach this differently. No. Superman's voice carried the finality of someone who had made a choice and would see it through regardless of cost. I let threats fester before. I waited for diplomatic solutions while Joker planned. While Metropolis burned. I won't make that mistake again. He rose into the air, power gathering around him like visible pressure. The shadows responded formations, tightening soldiers raising weapons that had no physical substance, but promised tangible harm. This is your choice, the stranger said. Not a taunt, an observation. You choose escalation because de-escalation feels like defeat. That's the pattern I'm here to break. Superman didn't respond with words. He responded with heat vision at full intensity. Sustained beams that could cut through starship hulls, targeting not the soldiers, but the stranger himself. The darkness rose to meet him, and somewhere in the sky above, beyond human sight, beyond conventional detection, something vast and terrible watched the proceedings with the patient attention of a judge, waiting to see if intervention would become necessary. Not yet, it decided. Let them demonstrate what they were. Then the reckoning could begin. The battle had started, but victory was not on the table. Only survival, or transformation. The heat vision struck darkness and vanished. Not absorbed, not reflected, simply ceased to exist at the point of contact, as if the beams had crossed a threshold where the rules Governing energy no longer applied. Superman held the assault for 7 seconds, pouring enough thermal output to glass a city block. The shadows drank it without effort. When he stopped breathing harder than physics should require, the stranger stood unchanged. Coat unmarred. Expression neutral. The crater floor had transformed into a sea of writhing black, and from that sea more soldiers rose in perfect formation. "This is your answer," the stranger said. "Overwhelming force applied until the problem submits or breaks. It's the only solution you trust anymore." Superman's jaw clenched. He descended toward the Shadow Army, prepared to demonstrate that physical contact would produce different results than ranged assault. Then the air displaced behind him with the distinctive crack of someone moving faster than sound. Wonder Woman arrived like war made manifest. Her armor caught the morning light even through the unnatural twilight. The lasso of truth coiled at her hip. Her sword already drawn edge sharp enough to split atoms if wielded with sufficient conviction. She assessed the battlefield in 2 seconds. Superman engaged against overwhelming numbers. Batman and his team positioned defensively. And at the center, a single figure radiating the kind of threat her warrior instincts recognized immediately. "Stand aside, Clark," she said, descending to land between Superman and the stranger. "This is what I was trained for." Batman moved forward. "Diana, wait. We don't fully understand." "I understand enough." Her eyes fixed on the stranger, with the absolute certainty of someone who had learned to trust combat instinct over diplomatic consideration. "You've brought war to a city that's already buried its dead. You've raised an army against those who protect it. That's all the understanding required." Constantine muttered something profane. "Brilliant. Add more escalation. That'll definitely help." Wonder Woman ignored him. She addressed the stranger directly, sword angled in a guard position that could transition to offense in a fraction of a second. "I am Diana of Themyscira, champion of the Amazons. I've fought gods and monsters and men who believe themselves beyond judgment. You will disperse your forces and surrender, or you will face consequences you cannot imagine." The stranger regarded her with the same neutral attention he'd given Superman. "You threaten well. Clear. Confident. Backed by demonstrated capability. But you're making the same error he did. You assume I respond to threats the way conventional opponents do. Then respond to action." Wonder Woman launched herself forward, sword leading, moving with speed that turned her into a blur of gold and crimson. The blade traced an arc designed to disarm without killing, to demonstrate superiority without committing to lethal force. The stranger didn't move. A figure materialized between them. Dark armor, reflecting no light movement, economical and precise. The newcomer's blade intercepted Wonder Woman's strike, with a sound like thunder compressing into a single note. The impact sent shockwaves across the crater, shattering already broken concrete into finer debris. Wonder Woman pulled back, reassessing. The figure before her stood 6 feet tall, humanoid but wrong in subtle ways. The armor appeared to be part of its body rather than equipment worn. Where eyes should be, red light burned with patient intensity. It held a long sword that matched its height, the blade impossibly dark, as if forged from the same substance as the Shadow Sea. "What is this?" Wonder Woman's voice remained steady, but her stance shifted. This wasn't a shadow soldier like the others. This was something else. Something that had met her attack and held ground. "Igris," the stranger said simply. "Martial grade, one of my first. He understands discipline better than most living warriors ever will." Igris moved. Not the wild aggression of a berserker or the desperate assault of someone outmatched. Controlled, measured. Each step calculated to maintain optimal distance, each adjustment to posture serving multiple defensive and offensive purposes simultaneously. Wonder Woman engaged blade work, showcasing millennia of Amazon training. She attacked high-low from angles designed to expose weaknesses in conventional guard. Igris met each strike with minimal effort, not overpowering her attacks, but redirecting them, bleeding momentum, forcing Wonder Woman to commit more energy than she gained from each exchange. "He's good," she acknowledged, circling for a better angle. But skilled doesn't mean unbeatable. She accelerated strength and speed, combining into assault patterns that would overwhelm most opponents through sheer volume of attacks. Igris adapted. His blade became a blur, intercepting strikes that should have been too fast to track. When Wonder Woman feinted left and struck right, Igris was already repositioning. When she went high to draw his guard up, then swept low, his blade had descended to meet the real attack. Superman moved to assist. The stranger raised one hand, and the Shadow Army surged forward, not attacking but creating a barrier of bodies that would require Superman to fight through ranks to reach Wonder Woman's position. "Let her fight," the stranger said. "She believes warrior skill determines righteousness. Let her test that belief against something that learned discipline from war itself, rather than training for it." Batman's tactical computer analyzed Igris's movement patterns. The data returned conclusions that violated conventional combat theory. He's not reacting to her attacks. He's predicting them, reading her body language, weight distribution, muscle tension. He knows what she's going to do before she fully commits. "That's impossible," Cyborg said. "That level of prediction requires processing speed beyond." "He's not alive," Constantine interrupted. "Not in the way we understand it. He's not limited by biological reaction time. He exists in a state where thought and action aren't separated by neuron transmission. He thinks the movement, and the movement occurs." Wonder Woman began to recognize the problem. Her attacks weren't being countered through superior strength or speed. They were being nullified through perfect efficiency. Every calorie she spent on offense produced zero results. Every technique she deployed met prepared response. She switched tactics, abandoning blade work for grappling. Amazon combat training included methods for disarming opponents at close range using leverage and technique to overcome raw power disadvantage. She caught Igris's sword arm twisted, applied a lock that should have dislocated the shoulder. Igris flowed with his movement, not resisting the lock, but accelerating into it, transforming her attempt at control into momentum for a throw. Wonder Woman found herself airborne, not from superior strength, but from her own force redirected. She recovered mid-flight, landing in a crouch, reassessing again. "You're fighting to win quickly," the stranger observed. "Warrior instinct, decisive victory through superior skill. But Igris doesn't fight to win. He fights to continue. Duration is his weapon. Every exchange that doesn't end in your favor moves probability toward exhaustion." "I don't exhaust." Wonder Woman rose, circling. Her breathing remained controlled, but Batman noticed the slight tension in her shoulders that indicated mounting frustration. "I'm not human. I don't tire like mortals. Everyone tires." The stranger's tone held no mockery. "Muscle fatigue is biological, but doubt is universal. And doubt is what Igris cultivates. He demonstrates that your skill, while formidable, isn't decisive. That perfection exists in opposition to your techniques. That every strategy you employ has been anticipated and prepared for." Wonder Woman attacked again. Fury adding edge to precision. She combined sword strikes with kicks, elbow strikes, headbutts. Anything to create an opening, find a weakness, break the pattern of perfect defense. Igris met everything. Not flashy, not wasteful. Just present at every point of contact, blade or body positioned exactly where needed to nullify each threat. She scored a hit. The blade sliced across Igris's arm, cutting through armor, drawing something dark that resembled blood, but moved wrong. Wonder Woman pressed the advantage, following up with combination strikes designed to capitalize on injury. Igris didn't slow. The wound closed, not healing, reforming. The darkness that served as his substance simply flowed back together, damage erased, as if it had never occurred. "You can't kill what's already dead," the stranger said. "And you can't tire what doesn't require rest. The parameters you're accustomed to don't apply. That's the lesson." Wonder Woman's expression hardened. "Then I'll destroy him completely, scatter him beyond reformation." She called upon the full measure of her strength attacks, accelerating to speeds that created sonic booms. The crater shook. Shock waves propagated across the shadow sea. Igris met the assault without yielding ground blade work, maintaining perfect economy despite the increased tempo. Superman watched from behind the shadow barrier, frustration building. This wasn't how battles concluded. Opponents either won or lost. They didn't continue indefinitely in perfect stalemate, neither side gaining advantage, the contest becoming exercise in futility. "Diana," he called. "Withdraw. We need different approach." "No." Her shout carried the conviction of someone who had built identity on warrior excellence. "I won't retreat from a single opponent. I won't." Igris struck, not the reactive defense he had maintained throughout the engagement, actual offense. His blade moved in an arc that Wonder Woman almost failed to intercept the strike, carrying force she hadn't anticipated. She blocked, but the impact drove her back 3 steps. Then Igris pressed. For the first time in the engagement, he advanced instead of holding ground. His attacks came faster, harder, each one building on the last, creating pressure that transformed defense into increasingly desperate scrambling. Wonder Woman realized the trap. He'd been learning. Every technique she'd deployed, every combination she'd attempted, every variation in her arsenal had been cataloged. And now he was using that data, attacking precisely where her defenses showed microsecond gaps, forcing her into positions that limited her options. "He's teaching you," the stranger said, voice carrying across the battlefield with perfect clarity despite the combat's noise. "You believed skill equaled superiority. He's demonstrating that skill can be matched, analyzed, defeated by sufficient discipline and patience. Your strength doesn't matter. Your divine heritage doesn't matter. All that matters is whether your techniques can overcome an opponent who treats combat as equation rather than contest." Wonder Woman's breath came harder now. Not from physical exhaustion, from the creeping realization that she was losing. Not dramatically, not through overwhelming counterattack, through erosion. Each exchange cost her more than it cost Igris. Each minute pushed probability further toward defeat. She switched to the lasso of truth golden rope, moving with her will, attempting to bind Igris and force submission through magical compulsion. The lasso wrapped around his sword arm. Light flared, the weapon's power activating. Igris didn't resist. He stepped into the binding closing distance, using the lasso's connection to pull Wonder Woman off balance. His free hand caught her wrist. The grip held strength that shouldn't exist in unliving form. "Truth," the stranger said. "Interesting choice. What truth will the lasso reveal about something that has no lies to conceal?" Igris knows what he is. He accepts it without reservation. Your weapon requires self-deception to exploit. It finds none. Wonder Woman pulled free lasso, retracting. She stood across from Igris, breathing controlled, but posture betraying frustration she rarely allowed to surface. "What are you trying to prove? That you have powerful servants, that your shadows can fight?" "I'm proving that faith and strength alone is insufficient. You came here certain that warrior skill and divine power would carry the day. You're discovering that certainty was premature. Not because you're weak, because you assumed your opponent would engage on terms favorable to you." The stranger gestured at Igris. "He fights the way war actually functions, when stripped of heroic narrative. Attrition, adaptation, patience. The side that can sustain combat longer wins. Individual prowess becomes irrelevant." Constantine had moved closer to Batman, voice low. "She's going to escalate. I've seen that look. She's going to decide that if skill isn't working, overwhelming destructive force is next. Batman nodded fractionally. Can you contain the fallout? From a demigod throwing a proper tantrum, not remotely. Best I can do is maybe shield us from immediate vaporization. Wonder Woman raised her sword, divine energy channeling through the blade. The weapon began to glow heat and light, combining into something that transcended either. If you won't fall to skill, you'll fall to absolute power. I'll erase you and your master from this place. She struck downward blade, impacting the crater floor with force that should have split the earth. Energy exploded outward, a shock wave of destruction that vaporized shadow soldiers, cracked bedrock, turned ash to plasma. When the light cleared, Igris stood untouched. The stranger had not moved. The shadow sea had receded briefly, but was already flowing back, soldiers reforming from darkness that existed independent of physical destruction. Power without precision, the stranger observed. You're resorting to escalation because measured force failed. That's the pattern this world taught you. When skill doesn't suffice, apply more violence. When that fails, apply catastrophic violence. The cycle continues until nothing remains to fight over. Wonder Woman's hands trembled, not from fear, from Bajta being lectured by someone who hid behind supernatural servants. You judge me, you who raise the dead to fight your battles, who preach about war while building an army. I don't judge. I observe. You fight because you believe combat determines virtue. I fight because I recognize some patterns must break or they consume everything. The difference is, I accept what I am. You pretend your violence serves justice. It does serve justice. Her shout carried pain beneath the fury. I've fought to protect the innocent, to stop those who would oppress and destroy. Everything I've done was to preserve life. And yet you stand in a crater created by someone who believed the same thing. Someone who decided that justice required absolute control. Who killed to protect and called it necessary. Tell me, Diana of the Myskera, what makes your certainty different from his? The question landed like a physical blow. Wonder Woman's expression shifted, conviction wavering for just a moment. Long enough for doubt to take root. Igris lowered his sword, not in surrender, but in recognition that the lesson had been delivered. He stepped back, returning to parade rest, a soldier awaiting further instruction. This isn't victory, Wonder Woman said, voice strained. This is stalemate. You've proven nothing. I've proven that your approach doesn't work against opponents who refuse to play by the rules you favor. That warrior excellence means nothing against enemies who treat combat as process rather than contest. That's not stalemate. That's defeat by different measurement. The stranger's eyes held no triumph. You came to demonstrate Amazon's superiority. You've demonstrated that superiority has limits. That's the only lesson you needed. Superman finally broke through the shadow barrier, soldiers parting before his advance. He landed beside Wonder Woman, hand on her shoulder. Diana, we withdraw. Regroup. This isn't working. She looked at him, then at Igris, then at the stranger who commanded shadows, and spoke of war with the weariness of someone who had seen civilizations fall. Every instinct screamed to continue to prove that Amazonian training and divine strength could overcome any opposition. But her tactical mind, trained through millennia of actual warfare, recognized truth she didn't want to accept. She was losing, not through inferior skill, through inferior framework. This isn't over, she said, sheathing her sword with deliberate care. No, the stranger agreed. It's not. But the next phase will make this look like restraint. In the sky above beyond, mortal perception, the vast attention that had been watching, shifted. Something was approaching. Something that had heard reports of disturbance in Metropolis and decided investigation was required. The stranger felt it. His expression didn't change, but his posture adjusted fractionally. Your cavalry is coming. More heroes who believe power equals authority. They'll repeat the patterns you've demonstrated, and the result will be identical. Batman's communicator crackled. Flash's voice urgent. Batman, we're en route to your position. Satellites picked up energy signatures consistent with Kryptonian-level combat. ETA 4 minutes. Do you need immediate extraction? Before Batman could respond, the stranger spoke loud enough for the communicator to catch. Come, bring everyone. Let me demonstrate what happens when a world built on heroic violence meets something that treats heroes as resources rather than threats. Flash's voice held new tension. Bruce, who is that? Batman looked at the stranger at the Shadow Army, standing in perfect discipline at Igris, who had fought Wonder Woman to stand still without apparent effort. Someone we're not equipped to handle, but come anyway. We'll need everyone for containment. The stranger smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. Not containment. Demonstration. By the time this concludes, you'll understand why wars that don't end become eternal, and why I'm here to ensure this one breaks before it reaches that threshold. Wonder Woman's fists clenched. Superman's eyes glowed with building heat. Constantine lit another cigarette with shaking hands, and in the depths of the Shadow Sea, something ancient and patient began to rise. Not Igris. Something else. Something that would make the previous engagement look like preliminary sparring. The demonstration had only begun. The true lesson was still to come. The 4 minutes passed like hours. Superman stood at the crater's edge, heat vision cycling through targeting calculations, every instinct demanding immediate action. Wonder Woman had withdrawn to a defensive position, sword still drawn, pride wounded, but discipline intact. The Shadow Army maintained formation, patient as stone. Batman worked through contingency protocols, each scenario ending in variables he couldn't account for. Cyborg monitored approach vectors for the incoming reinforcements. Constantine had given up pretense of strategic value and simply watched the stranger with the expression of someone witnessing mythology become documented fact. The stranger stood motionless, attention fixed on something beyond normal perception. When he spoke, his voice carried the flat certainty of someone reading predetermined outcomes. They're bringing speed, hoping velocity will overcome what strength couldn't. It won't. Flash arrived, first yellow lightning trailing behind him as he decelerated from Mach 4 to standstill in 0.3 seconds. He assessed the battlefield, took in the Shadow Army, spotted the stranger, and his expression shifted from concern to tactical alertness. Okay, Flash said, voice carrying forced casualness that didn't match his stance. Someone want to explain why Metropolis looks like it's hosting an invasion from the nightmare dimension? Later, Superman said. His gaze never left the stranger. Right now we need to contain hostile forces before... Before what? The stranger interrupted. Before I demonstrate further that your approach to conflict resolution is fundamentally broken, that ship has sailed. You've already committed to escalation. Now you'll discover what escalation produces when the opponent welcomes it. Green Lantern descended emerald constructs already forming around him. Shields, weapons, restraint fields. Hawkgirl followed Mace, crackling with nth metal energy. They positioned themselves with practiced efficiency, forming a perimeter that could respond to threats from multiple vectors. 5 heroes, the stranger observed. Each one capable of city-level destruction. Each one certain that combined force will overwhelm singular opposition. You're repeating historical patterns and expecting different results. We're ending a threat before it grows, Green Lantern said, ring already spinning up energy for a containment field. Whatever you are, wherever you're from, you've made your point. Stand down or we put you down. No. The stranger's hand moved in a gesture too subtle to be threatening, yet too deliberate to dismiss. You'll try. You'll fail, and in the process you'll understand why I'm here. The Shadow Sea rippled. Something moved beneath the surface, disturbing the darkness in ways that suggested massive displacement. Despite no visible form, Flash's connection to the Speed Force triggered warnings his conscious mind struggled to interpret danger from an angle that physics didn't usually accommodate. Movement, Flash reported. Big, fast, predatory signature, but wrong. Like a shark if sharks existed in dimensions that don't have water. The surface broke. What emerged defied easy classification. Insect-like body structure, but scaled to something that had grown beyond biological constraints. Exoskeleton dark as volcanic glass, segmented in ways that suggested both armor and articulated weaponry. 4 arms, each ending in appendages that could serve as hands or blades, depending on immediate need. The head resembled something between mantis and dragon mandibles that looked sharp enough to shear through tank armor. Purple light pulsed along the joints, where segments met not bioluminescence, but something closer to exposed energy coursing through alien physiology. When it moved, the motion carried predator economy, no wasted effort, every action serving multiple purposes. Beru, the stranger said. Martial grade. Strategic weapon. He adapts to any situation, learns from every engagement. And unlike Igris, who fights to demonstrate discipline, Beru fights to hunt. Beru's head swiveled, multifaceted eyes studying the assembled heroes with interest that felt disturbingly intelligent. When he spoke, the voice emerged as clicks and harmonics that somehow resolved into comprehensible language. New prey, strong prey. This will be instructive. Superman moved first, recognizing that allowing the enemy to set tempo was tactical error. He accelerated to combat speed closing distance in a blur fist aimed for Beru's center mass, with enough force to crater concrete. Beru wasn't there. The space Superman's fist passed through held only air. The creature had repositioned 3 feet left movement so fluid, it seemed to bypass the intermediate positions between start and destination. Superman adjusted heat vision, lancing out. Beru's exoskeleton shifted sections, rotating to present angled surfaces. The heat beams struck and deflected, reflected energy scoring the crater floor in molten lines. He's not dodging, Flash observed, already moving lightning arcing around him. He's predicting, reading Superman's attack patterns and positioning himself where the strike won't land. Flash accelerated, approaching from Superman's flank, coordinating assault to overwhelm Beru's ability to reposition. Superman went high. Flash went low. Green Lantern constructed a cage of hard light to limit escape vectors. Beru burst upward, not fleeing but repositioning to higher ground. His trajectory took him through Green Lantern's construct claws, shearing through emerald energy like it was decorative rather than weaponized will. He landed atop a ruined building, surveying the heroes below with the patience of a predator assessing herd dynamics. You coordinate. Beru's voice carried across the distance. Good. Coordination suggests intelligence. Intelligence makes prey more satisfying. Hawkgirl launched herself at Beru mace, swinging in arcs, designed to cave in armor. Beru met her 4 arms, moving in patterns that turned defense into fluid art. He caught the mace, turned its momentum, used Hawkgirl's own strength to throw her into a controlled spin that ended with her crashing through what remained of a building's facade. He's playing with us, Wonder Woman said, recognizing the signs. Testing capabilities, building tactical profile. Then we hit him with everything, Superman said. Overwhelming force, no holding back. The 5 heroes attacked in concert. Superman and Wonder Woman from opposite angles. Flash moving faster than thought, creating vacuum strikes through displaced air. Green Lantern constructing increasingly complex restraint systems. Hawkgirl recovering and adding nth metal energy to the assault. Beru adapted. When Superman came from the right, Beru positioned himself so the attack would force Superman into Flash's path. When Wonder Woman struck high, Beru ducked, while simultaneously catching Green Lantern's construct and using it as shield against Hawkgirl's mace. Every defensive action served multiple purposes, each movement setting up counters 2 and 3 steps ahead. He's not fighting 5 separate opponents, Batman said from his observation position. He's fighting the spaces between them, using their coordination against them. Constantine nodded, expression grim. Predator tactics. Natural selection refined over countless hunts. Except this thing's not natural. It's something that learned how to hunt from wars instead of ecosystems. Baru struck back. Not wild aggression, but calculated violence. His claws caught Flash's leg mid-stride, the impact not injuring, but disrupting rhythm, sending the speedster tumbling through broken concrete. He twisted, using Superman's momentum to throw the Kryptonian into Wonder Woman's approach vector. The two collided, tangled, lost precious seconds recovering. Green Lantern intensified construct density, creating restraint fields that could hold small stars. Baru shredded through them, each severed construct, teaching him the ring's energy signature, allowing him to anticipate and counter subsequent attempts. Your technology is interesting, Baru said, voice carrying almost conversational tone. Will-based manifestation. Strong, versatile, but limited by imagination and concentration. Disrupt either factor and the construct's collapse. He moved faster than Green Lantern could track closing distance claws, striking not at the lantern himself, but at the ring hand. The attack didn't penetrate the protective aura, but the impact rattled bone, disrupted focus. The constructs flickered. Baru pressed the advantage. Not for the kill, for the lesson. He demonstrated that he could strike at will, could bypass defenses that had held against planetary-level threats, could turn the hero's strengths into exploitable weaknesses. Superman recovered rage building beneath tactical control. This wasn't combat. It was humiliation delivered with surgical precision. Enough. He unleashed heat vision at full intensity, no longer targeting Baru, but the building beneath him, intending to collapse the structure and force the creature into vulnerable position. The building came down. Baru rode the collapse, using falling debris as cover, as stepping stones, as weapons thrown at pursuing heroes. He emerged from the dust cloud, unscathed, positioned atop new high-ground mandibles, spread in what might have been insect approximation of a smile. You prioritize destroying terrain over protecting bystanders, Baru observed. Interesting tactical evolution. The hero who once refused collateral damage now embraces it when frustrated. The words hit harder than claws. Superman's expression darkened. There are no bystanders here. The crater was evacuated years ago. But you didn't verify that before attacking. You assumed. You chose destruction over confirmation because anger overrode caution. Baru's multifaceted eyes glittered. That's what I'm teaching you. How pressure transforms methodology. How certainty becomes liability when opponent controls tempo. Flash tried a different approach, vibrating through matter to strike from unexpected angles. Baru anticipated a claw waiting at the exact position where Flash would emerge from the wall. The impact sent Flash sprawling, costume-torn ribs bruised. Speed is advantage when you control engagement distance, Baru said. But I set the distance. I choose when you're close enough to threaten. Your power becomes irrelevant. Wonder Woman engaged, abandoning finesse for pure aggression. Her strikes could shatter mountains, each blow powered by divine strength and Amazon fury. Baru met her forearms working in concert to deflect, redirect, absorb. He didn't match her strength. He made her strength meaningless through perfect economy of motion. The Amazon fights with skill, but no. Baru noted blocking a strike that would have decapitated lesser opponents. But skill built on assumptions. You assume superior technique guarantees victory. I assume nothing. I adapt, learn, evolve. Your advantage erodes with every exchange. Green Lantern created a temporal stasis field, trying to freeze Baru in locked time. Baru's claws found the field's resonance frequency vibrating at precise intervals that shattered the construct from within. The backlash sent Green Lantern reeling ring flickering as concentration broke. Superman watched his team being systematically dismantled. Not through superior power, through tactical superiority that rendered power irrelevant. Every conventional response they attempted, Baru had already calculated counter-strategies. Every coordination they deployed, he turned into liability. "This is what I do," Baru said, perched atop rubble surrounded by heroes who should have overwhelmed a single opponent minutes ago. "I hunt. I adapt. I demonstrate that strength without intelligence is just loud failure. And I teach lessons that prey rarely survive long enough to apply." Then the civilian appeared, a woman ash-gray hair, emerging from one of the ruined buildings where she'd been sheltering, one of the survivors from the previous night. She stumbled into the combat zone, disoriented by the sounds of battles, searching for something. "My daughter," she called out. "Has anyone seen my daughter?" She went looking for water, and Superman's attention split. The tactical situation, the civilian. The choice crystallized in an instant. Baru moved, not toward the woman, toward the building she'd emerged from. His claws struck the structure's remaining support, and the facade began to collapse. If it fell, it would crush the woman. If Superman rescued her, he'd leave his team vulnerable. If he prioritized the team, a civilian died. The calculus of impossible choice. Superman chose. He accelerated toward the woman, crossing the distance faster than thought, grabbing her, carrying her to safety as the building collapsed behind them. In the 2 seconds that took, Baru struck the other heroes with coordinated precision. Flash went down from a strike to the solar plexus that disrupted his Speed Force connection. Green Lantern's ring hand took a calculated impact that shattered concentration. Wonder Woman found herself locked in a grapple that pinned 3 of her limbs. Hawkgirl's mace was torn from her grip and thrown into the shadow sea. 2 seconds. 4 heroes neutralized. Superman set the woman down outside the combat zone, then turned back to find his team's scattered, bleeding positions compromised. "You chose to save one," Baru said. His voice carried no mockery, simple observation. "Admirable, heroic, and tactically disastrous. I created that choice deliberately, forced you to prioritize, used your virtue as weapon against you." The woman Superman had saved looked around confused. "My daughter, I need to find—" "There is no daughter," the stranger's voice cut across the battlefield. "Baru created the illusion, exploited your protective instinct, demonstrated that your strength means nothing when I control what you're forced to protect." Superman's eyes blazed. "You used a civilian as bait. I used your perception of a civilian as bait. She's real. Her distress is real. But her daughter was safe hours ago. You didn't verify. You reacted. That's the lesson." The stranger stepped forward, shadows parting before him. "You've built your entire methodology on responding to immediate crisis. Baru proves that methodology fails when crisis is manufactured to exploit your response patterns." Superman rose into the air, power gathering around him like visible fury. "This ends now. I don't care what it costs. I'm putting you down." "No," the stranger said. "You're escalating because tactical approach failed, because coordinated assault with 5 heroes couldn't overcome 1 opponent, because your certainty about heroic superiority is eroding. That's not ending me. That's proving my point." Baru settled into a crouch, ready to continue, purple light pulsing faster along his exoskeleton. More lessons to teach, more tactical errors to exploit. I enjoy this prey. Strong, proud, certain of righteousness. The fall from that certainty will be instructive. Batman's voice came through the communicator, strained. "Clark, stand down. We can't win this through direct combat. We need different approach." "There's no different approach." Superman's shout carried pain beneath the rage. Every option we try, they've already countered. Every strength we have, they turn into weakness. What approach do you suggest? Bruce surrender. Strategic withdrawal. Regroup. Analyze. Plan. Batman's tactical mind was already working through alternatives. This isn't a battle we can win through force. It's a statement designed to demonstrate our tactics are obsolete. Then we make a different statement. Superman's hands clenched into fists. Heat built behind his eyes. We show them that some things can't be adapted to. That overwhelming power deployed without restraint breaks any defense. The stranger's expression didn't change. But something in his posture shifted. Recognition of a threshold about to be crossed. You're choosing scorched earth. Total application of force regardless of collateral impact. That's the moment I've been waiting for. The moment when the hero becomes the thing he swore to prevent. Superman didn't respond with words. He responded with action that would either end the threat or end Metropolis. The sky lit up with power that could reshape landscapes, and Baru, patient as death itself, prepared to demonstrate that even apocalyptic force could be turned into weapon against its wielder. The lesson was nearly complete. The price of that education had just escalated beyond anything Superman had anticipated paying. Superman's power built like pressure before an explosion, the air itself distorting around him. Heat vision cycled to maximum output. Every cell in his body prepared to unleash force that could crack tectonic plates. The decision crystallized in his mind with terrible clarity. If conventional combat failed, unconventional annihilation would succeed. Batman recognized the signs. He'd seen this before in the days when Superman had stopped measuring costs and started calculating only outcomes. The moment when restraint became obstacle rather than principle. Clark, don't. The word died as spatial displacement tore through the crater. Not teleportation, not conventional portal technology. Something else. Reality folded, and suddenly they weren't standing in Metropolis ruins anymore. The Batcave materialized around them. Stalactites overhead. Computer banks lining the walls, the familiar smell of limestone and machine oil. But wrong. The lighting had shifted to red alert status. Containment fields hummed to active standby. Every defensive system Batman had installed over decades of preparation had activated simultaneously. Superman spun disoriented. What? Contingency Omega-7? Batman said, voice tight with controlled urgency. Spatial displacement triggered by threat assessment exceeding acceptable parameters. The cave's AI determined you were about to cause catastrophic damage and intervened. You had a contingency to kidnap me. Superman's eyes blazed, heat vision barely restrained. I have contingencies for every scenario, including the one where you stop thinking tactically and start acting like the problem you used to solve. Batman moved to the central console, fingers already entering command sequences. The cave's systems detected energy buildup, consistent with your maximum output. They responded according to protocol. Constantine appeared through the displacement field, stumbling, catching himself against a stalagmite. Bloody hell. Warning before you rearrange geography would be appreciated. Cyborg materialized, next systems recalibrating. Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, Flash, Hawkgirl, all displaced to the cave, separated from the stranger and his shadow army. The woman with ash-gray hair had not been transported. Neither had Baru. The stranger stood alone in the Metropolis crater, surrounded by his forces, watching the space where the heroes had been. His expression registered mild interest, nothing more. Clever, he said to the empty air. Remove the pieces from the board when they become liabilities. Batman thinks in systems. That's why he's more dangerous than the strong ones. In the Batcave, Superman rounded on Batman power, still crackling around him. Release the field. We're not finished. We are. Batman's hands moved across holographic controls, bringing up tactical displays. Every engagement we've attempted has failed. Direct assault, coordinated strike, overwhelming force, none of it worked. Continuing down that path produces only escalation and casualties. Then what do you suggest? Superman's voice carried frustration that bordered on desperation. We can't leave that thing in Metropolis. We can't allow it to operate unchecked. We contain it, analyze it, find exploitable weakness. Batman pulled up spatial mapping of the crater. Constantine, can you seal the displacement rift? Prevent it from following us here. Constantine examined the residual energy signature, face pale. I can try. But that thing's already demonstrated it doesn't respect conventional barriers, and its shadows move through my best protections like they weren't there. Try anyway. Batman turned to Cyborg. Interface with Brother Eye. I need full analysis of every interaction we've had with that entity. Movement patterns, energy signatures, tactical tendencies, anything exploitable. Cyborg's systems began the integration process. Within seconds, his expression shifted. Bruce, Brother Eye's not responding normally. The interface is there, but contaminated, like something's rewriting the data as I access it. Batman's jaw tightened. He pulled up Brother Eye's core systems running diagnostic protocols. The results painted a picture he'd feared but hoped to avoid. Brainiac's integration. It's more complete than we thought. The system's not just storing his protocols, it's actively running them. Every scan of that entity, every data point we collect, it's being processed through alien architecture that doesn't follow our logic. Can you purge it? Wonder Woman had sheathed her sword, but her stance remained combat-ready, not without destroying Brother Eye entirely. And we need its surveillance capacity for... The lights flickered. Every screen in the cave went dark simultaneously. Emergency power should have kicked in within milliseconds. It didn't. The darkness held for 3 seconds that felt like minutes. When the lights returned, they were wrong. Dimmer, tinted faintly purple, and the air had grown cold. Constantine swore viciously. We're not alone. A figure stood in this cave's center, where nothing had been moments before. Tall frame draped in tattered robes that seemed to absorb light. Hunched posture suggesting age or damage. In one hand, a staff topped with a crystal that pulsed with the same purple radiance that now tainted the cave's illumination. Tusk. Batman said, accessing weapon systems that should have activated automatically but remained dormant. How did you breach the cave's defenses? The figure's head lifted, revealing features that suggested skeletal structure beneath translucent skin. When it spoke, the voice resonated like stones grinding together in deep earth. Breach implies I forced entry. I was invited. Your surveillance system reached into places it should not touch. Created resonance between here and there. I followed the echo home. Cyborg's systems flared with warnings. He's right. Brother Eye's connection to the crater created a data bridge. He used it like a highway. Tusk raised the staff. The crystal pulsed. Every electronic system in the cave stuttered. Computer banks flickered between operational and crashed states. Life support systems cycled through reset sequences. Even Cyborg's internal processors experienced momentary dropout. You rely on tools. Tusk observed, voice carrying no judgment, only statement. Surveillance, analysis, containment fields built on technology, and Constantine's borrowed magic. Remove the tools, and what remains? Batman activated manual overrides, trying to restore system stability. The controls responded sluggishly, as if the cave's infrastructure had developed severe lag. Constantine. Counterspell. Now. Constantine was already moving, pulling chalk from his coat, sketching protective circles with practiced speed. He began the incantation words in languages that predated human civilization, channeling energy from ley lines that ran beneath Gotham's bedrock. The spell built power. Purple light met golden light in the space between Constantine and Tusk. For 3 seconds they contested magical forces, canceling and reinforcing in patterns too complex for non-practitioners to follow. Then Constantine's circle went dark. Not dispelled, simply denied. The energy that should have flowed through his working found no outlet, no destination, no function. It dispersed harmlessly, leaving Constantine gasping. "Your magic asks the universe to temporarily change rules," Tusk said. "Mine doesn't ask. It deletes the question. Where your spell seeks output, I provide null response. No counter, no reflection. Just void where mechanism should exist." Constantine stumbled back, clutching his chest where the spell's backlash had hit. "That's not magic. That's administrative access. You're not rewriting the rules. You're removing them entirely." "Correct." Tusk moved forward, staff tapping against stone. Each impact sent ripples through the cave's systems. Lights dimmed further. Computer screens showed cascading errors. "The Shadow Monarch grants me authority over systems, technology, magic, biology. Wherever rules create structure, I introduce absence, not chaos. Absence." Green Lantern formed constructs hard light barriers designed to contain and isolate. The constructs took shape, emerald energy solidifying into walls that could hold supernovas. Tusk pointed the staff. The crystal pulsed. The constructs didn't shatter. They simply ceased. One moment solid energy. The next nothing. No explosion, no energy release. Just transition from existence to non-existence. Ring's connection to the emotional spectrum requires continuous data stream from Ochai, Tusk explained, moving closer to Green Lantern. "I've introduced interruption to that stream, not severed. Interrupted. Your constructs form, then lose coherence because the signal drops microseconds after manifestation." Green Lantern tried again. Same result. Construct formation, momentary solidity, immediate dissolution. "This is impossible. The Ring's connection is quantum encrypted, can't be jammed. Quantum systems still follow rules. Rules can be identified. Once identified, they can be exploited. Not through superior force. Through recognition that all systems have dependencies. Disrupt the dependency and complexity becomes vulnerability." Tusk gestured with the staff. The temperature dropped another 5 degrees. Frost began forming on the computer banks. "Your cave depends on power grids, cooling systems, structural integrity maintained through constant monitoring. What happens when monitoring stops?" Batman's hands flew across manual controls, trying to root around the interference. Every backup system he activated responded for seconds before experiencing the same dropout Tusk had demonstrated with the Ring constructs. "You're not attacking the systems directly," Batman realized. "You're attacking the connections between systems, the protocols that allow components to communicate. Yes, a fortress is strong, but a fortress requires supply lines, communication networks, coordination between defensive elements. Interrupt those, and the fortress becomes a tomb for its defenders." Tusk planted the staff. The crystal's pulse synchronized with something beneath the cave-deep stone formations that resonated at specific frequencies. The Bat Cave's superstructure groaned. Not collapse. Not yet. But the sound of weight distribution, changing of supports experiencing stress they weren't designed to accommodate. Superman moved, intending to remove Tusk physically. The stranger's servant didn't retreat. He simply raised one hand, fingers spread. Superman's flight cut out. Not his power, just the application. He dropped 3 feet before catching himself, but the moment of vulnerability was clear. His connection to Earth's yellow sun, the source of his abilities, had experienced interruption. Brief. Recoverable, but present. Kryptonian physiology stores solar energy in cellular structure, Tusk said. Very efficient. But storage requires continuous absorption to maintain peak levels. I've introduced opacity between you and the sun. Temporary, reversible, but sufficient to demonstrate that even your power has dependencies. Superman's eyes blazed. He didn't need flight to close distance. He lunged forward, strength still intact, fist aimed for Tusk's center mass. Darkness erupted between them. Not shadows from the sea outside. Local darkness generated from the cave's own lack of light. Tusk shaped it into barrier, not solid but viscous, like trying to punch through tar. Superman's momentum carried him into the darkness, then stopped force bleeding away through medium that offered no proper resistance point. Wonder Woman drew her sword, divine metal that had been forged by gods and tempered in celestial fires. She struck at Tusk blade, moving faster than mortal eye could track. The sword hit the staff. Metal met crystal. The sound was wrong, not the ring of weapon meeting weapon, but the hollow tone of impact in vacuum. Wonder Woman's sword vibrated at resonance frequency, the divine harmonics that gave it power, suddenly fighting against interference that shouldn't exist. Your weapon draws strength from divine connection, Tusk said, not moving from where he stood. Olympian forge work maintained through prayers and belief. I've introduced noise into that connection. Not severed. Noise. Static. Your sword still functions, but at reduced efficiency. 40% power loss. Enough to matter in extended engagement. Flash tried speed vibrating through matter to bypass conventional defenses. He phased through the cave floor, intending to emerge beneath Tusk and strike from an angle the creature couldn't easily defend. Tusk's staff pulsed as Flash emerged. The speedster's connection to the speed force stuttered. Not cut. Stuttered. Like a signal experiencing packet loss. Flash's speed dropped from light speed to merely supersonic momentum conservation, throwing him off course. He crashed into a stalagmite costume-torn temporal displacement, leaving him disoriented. Speed force exists in dimensions perpendicular to normal space-time, Tusk observed. Accessing it requires precision. I've introduced imprecision. Fractional delays between thought and manifestation. At your velocities, fractions matter. Batman realized the full scope of the problem. This wasn't a fight. It was a demonstration. Tusk wasn't trying to kill them. He was proving that every advantage they possessed, every tool they relied upon, every system they'd built their defense strategies around, all of it, could be rendered inoperable through sufficiently sophisticated interference. What do you want? Batman asked, hands still on controls that barely responded. If you intended to eliminate us, you'd have done it by now. I want nothing. My sovereign sent me to establish fact. Tusk gestured around the cave. This place represents your greatest advantage. Technology, preparation, redundancy, backup systems for backup systems. And I've demonstrated that none of it provides security against opponent who operates on different framework. Your tools don't fail because I'm stronger. They fail because I delete the mechanisms that allow tools to function. Constantine had recovered enough to speak. You're making a point. Fine. Point made. Now what? You keep us trapped here while your boss does whatever he wants in Metropolis. No, I release you. But you carry understanding back to engagement. Tusk pulled the staff from the ground. The cave systems began recovering power, returning electronics, rebooting environmental controls, restoring normal temperature. You cannot trap what refuses to be limited by your systems. You cannot analyze what exists outside your framework. You cannot prepare for what your preparations cannot anticipate. The interference cleared. Brother Eye came back online, displaying data corruption alerts across every screen. Cyborg's processors stabilized. Green Lantern's constructs held coherence. Flash's speed force connection restored, but they all felt it. the fragility, the recognition that everything they'd relied upon had been switched off like a light, then switched back on, only because their opponent chose to demonstrate mercy rather than capability. "Your contingency brought you here," Tusk said, moving toward the cave's entrance. "You believed this place provided advantage, safety, control. I've proven that assumption false. When you return to the crater, you'll carry that knowledge. Your certainty has eroded. That erosion is the lesson." Superman blocked the exit despite understanding the futility. "We're not letting you leave. You're not capable of preventing it." Tusk raised the staff one final time. The crystal pulsed, and darkness swallowed him whole. When it cleared, he was gone. No portal, no displacement signature, just absence where presence had been. Batman slumped against the console, mind racing through implications. Every contingency he'd prepared assumed he could rely on the cave's systems. That assumption was now proven false. If an enemy could simply delete infrastructure, then infrastructure-dependent strategies became liabilities. "He's right," Batman said quietly. "We can't contain this. We can't prepare for it using conventional methodology." "Then we use unconventional methodology," Superman said, but his voice carried less certainty than before. The moment when his flight had cut out still echoed. The recognition that even his power had exploitable dependencies. Constantine lit a cigarette, hands shaking badly enough that it took 3 tries. "I've been doing this for decades. Fought demons, angels, things that exist in the spaces between life and death. And I've never encountered something that could just delete magic. Not counter it. Not reflect it. Delete the mechanism that allows it to function. That's not a weapon. That's a statement about obsolescence." Wonder Woman retrieved her sword, feeling the vibration still resonating in the blade. 40% power loss. Against conventional opponents, still sufficient. Against what they were facing, potentially catastrophic. Green Lantern stared at his ring, watching constructs form and hold as they should. But the memory remained. The moment when they'd simply ceased. No warning, no gradual failure, just existence to non-existence in a blink. Flash checked his connection to the Speed Force, finding it stable now, but unable to forget the stuttering sensation. Like running on a road that randomly developed gaps. At his velocities, a momentary disruption could turn into fatal collision. "We're outmatched," Hawkgirl said what everyone was thinking. "Not in raw power, in framework. They're playing a game we don't have rules for." "Then we change the game," Superman said. "Force them to fight on our terms instead of theirs." "How?" Batman's question carried genuine uncertainty, a tone his teammates rarely heard from him. "Every term we've established, they've demonstrated they can simply delete. Direct combat fails. Coordinated assault fails. Technological advantage fails. Magical intervention fails. Strategic positioning fails. What terms do we have left?" The question hung in the air unanswered. Above them, through miles of stone and earth, the crater waited. The stranger stood among his shadows, patient as geological time, counting down to a confrontation he'd already calculated the outcome for. And deep within Brother Eye's corrupted systems, something ancient and patient cataloged the data, comparing it against archives of civilizations that had faced similar impossible choices. Every one of those civilizations had made the same decision: escalation. It had never saved them, but they'd tried anyway. The pattern was holding. Soon the final pieces would move into position, and the true cost of certainty would be demonstrated in terms that could not be deleted, interrupted, or avoided. The counting continued. The Batcave remained silent for 20 seconds after Tusk's departure. Not the comfortable silence of preparation, but the hollow quiet that followed fundamental assumptions being shattered. Batman stood at the console, hands still on controls that had proven unreliable when they mattered most. Superman hovered 3 inches off the ground, testing his flight, confirming the connection to solar radiation had stabilized. Wonder Woman sheathed her sword with deliberate care, the blade still carrying residual vibration from interference it wasn't designed to experience. Flash vibrated in place, running diagnostic checks through his Speed Force connection. Green Lantern formed and dismissed test constructs, each one holding coherence, but carrying the memory of dissolution. Constantine broke the silence. We're having the wrong conversation. We're treating this like a tactical problem. How to overcome, how to defeat, how to neutralize. But that's not what's happening here. Then what is happening? Superman's voice carried strained control. The interruption to his powers, however brief, had triggered instincts he'd spent years suppressing. Vulnerability, helplessness, the sensations that had driven him toward authoritarianism in the first place. We're being audited. Constantine gestured at the screens showing corrupted data from Brother Eye. That thing's not here to conquer. It's here to evaluate, to measure. And I think we've been failing the assessment pretty badly. Batman pulled up the timeline of events correlating incidents with Brother Eye's anomaly detection. The system started flagging irregularities 96 hours ago. Small things, temperature fluctuations, biometric inconsistencies, all of it centered on Metropolis Crater. Cyborg interfaced with the data stream's processors, working through corruption to extract usable intelligence. The anomalies follow a pattern. They started as passive observation, scanning, then escalated to interaction, the 12 soldiers, then to direct engagement when we arrived. It's not random. The screens flickered. Every display in the cave simultaneously switched to a single image. Brother Eye's logo, but distorted. Overlaid with symbols that didn't belong to any human language system. Text scrolled beneath in ASCII characters that approximated meaning through linguistic brute force. Catastrophic threat detected, classification, Omega level incursion, location, Metropolis, crater. Grid, Epsilon 7. Probability of conventional countermeasure success, 0%. Recommended action, immediate planetary evacuation. The text paused, cursor blinking. Then new lines appeared. Analysis complete. Entity designation. Shadow Monarch, comparative threat level. Dark Seed class, strategic assessment engagement. Inadvisable, revised recommendation. Diplomatic resolution or extinction level response. Superman read the assessment, jaw tightening. Brother Eye thinks we need to evacuate the planet or deploy extinction level force. Those are the only options it's providing. It's not providing options. Batman studied the corrupted overlay symbols. It's reporting conclusions from Brainiac's integrated systems. This is what his archives say about entities like what we're facing. And the archives suggest every civilization that encountered one either fled or died trying to fight. Wonder Woman moved closer to the screens. How many civilizations in those archives encountered something like this? Cyborg pulled the data. His expression went carefully neutral. 47 documented cases, time span ranging from 300 to 8,000 years ago. Average civilization survival rate after encounter, 0%. They all died. Flash's voice rose slightly. Every single one. No, some evacuated. Abandoned their homeworlds entirely rather than face the threat. The ones that stayed and fought. Cyborg paused. The archives describe it as resource conversion. The civilizations didn't just lose. They became fuel for the entity they fought. Every soldier deployed, every weapon system activated, every citizen conscripted. All of it eventually turned into components of the enemy's forces. Constantine laughed, the sound brittle and sharp. Shadow extraction. That's what this is. It's not killing. It's recruiting. Every death in combat against it potentially becomes another soldier in its army. The more you fight, the stronger it gets. Literally. Batman's tactical mind processed the implications. That's why it's demonstrating restraint. It's not trying to win through overwhelming force. It's trying to make us commit to full-scale war. Because full-scale war produces massive casualties. And massive casualties become resources, Superman finished. His expression had gone cold. It's baiting us into the one strategy that guarantees we lose. Total war. The screens flickered again. New text appeared, but this time, it wasn't Brother Eye's standard output. The formatting was different, more direct, as if something was speaking through the system rather than the system reporting. You understand partially. I do not seek your war. I seek to end it, but the mechanism feeding your conflict remains active. That mechanism must be neutralized. It's communicating directly, Cyborg said, systems flaring with alerts. Using Brother Eye as interface. The bandwidth required for this is it shouldn't be possible. The data compression alone. Who speaks the text demanded. Victor Stone, Cyborg responded, voice steady despite obvious strain. Attempting to establish communication protocol. Please identify yourself and state intentions. The cursor blinked. For 3 seconds, nothing. Then sung JinWoo. JinWoo, Shadow Monarch, Administrator of Death Sovereignty, Intention, Termination of Perpetual Conflict Cycle. Batman leaned forward. You claim you're here to end war. Your actions suggest otherwise. You've attacked, demonstrated hostile capability, threatened. I have responded to aggression, demonstrated consequence, threatened. Nothing that was not already occurring. Your world maintains weapons of mass destruction. Maintains surveillance states, maintains systems built to perpetuate control through force. I threaten those systems, not the people they claim to protect. You killed 12 soldiers, but us, Wonder Woman said. Converted them into your shadow army. How is that different from what you're accusing us of? Those 12 executed civilians for thought crime. They served system built on suppression. I ended their service to that system. They now serve different purpose. The civilians they would have killed survive. Calculate net outcome. Constantine stepped forward. Right. Utilitarian ethics from an entity that treats death like an employment contract. Here's a question for you, mate. What happens when you've neutralized all the systems you find objectionable? What's the endgame? I return to observation. Your world continues without my intervention. Unless war restarts, then I return to conclude it. That's not good enough, Superman said. You're asking us to trust that you'll leave. That you won't decide human civilization itself is the problem that needs neutralizing. Trust is not required. Only recognition of pattern. You built empire on certainty that your violence served justice when that empire fell. Did the infrastructure of violence disappear? Or did it simply change administrators? The question hit with precision that suggested the Shadow Monarch understood their situation better than they'd assumed. Superman's regime had fallen. But the weapons remained. The surveillance networks, the military installations built to enforce global peace through superior firepower. Batman had kept some of those systems active. Contingency protocols, defensive preparations, insurance against the next existential threat. The stranger wasn't wrong to identify them as infrastructure of continued war. What mechanism are you referring to? Batman asked. You said something is feeding our conflict. What specifically? The screens shifted. New data appeared, energy signatures, spatial distortions, patterns that Brother Eye had been recording but not interpreting. The corruption in the system had hidden them, buried them under layers of Brainiac's residual code. Your surveillance system, contaminated by Coluan integration, creates resonance between dimensions. That resonance attracts attention. Attention from what? Cyborg systems work to decode the energy signature data. These readings are coming from outside normal space-time. Multiple sources, some of them registering power levels that match or exceed apocalypse-class threats. Brainiac did not come to your world randomly. He was drawn to Brother Eye's scanning of soul data that says same scanning now draws others. They sense world rich in conflict, rich in harvestable resources they will come to claim. Invasion, Wonder Woman said. You're saying we're broadcasting a signal that attracts hostile forces. Correct, your attempts to monitor and control have created vulnerability. The more you scan, the louder the signal, the greater the threat. Flash moved closer to the screens, reading the energy signature patterns. How long until something responds to the signal? The cursor blinked. Then, arrival imminent, spatial displacement, detected coordinates, metropolis, crater classification hostile. Alarms erupted across the Batcave. Every sensor array simultaneously registered massive energy signature materializing at the crater's center. The power levels exceeded anything they'd recorded outside of Apocalypse invasion forces. Boom tube, Cyborg reported. No, wait, different signature. Similar principle, but the technology's not new god origin. It's... His expression shifted to something approaching horror. It's Kaluan. Brainiac-level Kaluan. Something's using his technology to open a gateway. On the screen, satellite imagery showed the crater transforming. Light erupted from the ground, not explosion, but emergence. A structure forcing itself into reality from somewhere else. Angular architecture that hurt to look at, directly geometry that suggested dimensions beyond the standard 3. Size, Batman demanded. 300 meters at base, growing. Structural composition unknown. Energy output. Cyborg's voice tightened. It's off the scale. Whatever came through is drawing power directly from the dimensional breach. As long as the gate's open, it has functionally unlimited resources. Superman was already moving toward the cave exit. We need to contain this before it reaches the city. Full mobilization. Every hero we can contact. Negative, the text on screen declared. Mobilization produces escalation. Escalation feeds the pattern I came to break. Then what do you suggest? Batman's question carried an edge. We let an extinction-level threat establish itself unchallenged. I will neutralize the incursion. You will observe and understand why your methodology fails. Absolutely not. Superman's voice carried the authority he'd cultivated during the regime years. We're not standing aside while an unknown entity fights an unknown threat on our world. We engage, coordinate, contain. The screens went dark. Every display in the cave simultaneously shutting down. When they came back online, a single sentence remained. The choice was never yours to make observe or become resources. Then Brother Eye's systems crashed completely. Not interference, complete shutdown. The kind of catastrophic failure that required manual restart and full system rebuild. In the crater, 300 miles away, JinWoo stood before the emerging structure. Shadow soldiers formed ranks behind him, not dozens but hundreds, drawn from the sea of darkness that now covered the entire eastern district. The invading force poured through the gateway machines, biological constructs, entities that existed in states between matter and energy. They came expecting resistance from a world torn by war, weakened by internal conflict, ripe for harvesting. What they found was different. They found something that had been waiting for them, something that understood invasion mechanics because it had ended invasions before, and something that would demonstrate to watching heroes exactly why their strategy of meeting force with force had been doomed from the start. The invasion had arrived, not to conquer Earth, to be consumed by something far older and far more patient than any threat the heroes had previously faced. The demonstration was beginning. The education would be written in the dissolution of certainty. And when it concluded, every surviving witness would understand why wars that don't end properly become eternal. The counting had reached critical threshold. Now came the reckoning. The journey from the Batcave to Metropolis should have taken 12 minutes by Batmobile. Superman covered it in 40 seconds, Wonder Woman matching his pace. Flash arrived first, speed force burning as he pushed past Mach 5, the need to witness outweighing tactical caution. Green Lantern carried the others via construct platform, Emerald Energy, straining against the distance. They arrived to find war, not battle, war. The distinction crystallized immediately in the scope of what had emerged through the gateway. The Kalyuan structure had finished manifesting a tower that defied conventional architecture by existing partially in dimensions human perception couldn't fully process. Its surface rippled with mechanical movement, automated defense systems, deployment bays, processing centers that analyzed and cataloged everything within scanning range. From those bays poured the invasion force. Machines first walking weapons platforms that moved with insectile precision. Each unit stood 12 feet tall, articulated legs carrying weapon systems that cycled through multiple firing modes. Energy cannons, kinetic accelerators, molecular disruptors. They advanced in formation that suggested hive coordination. Behind the machines came biological constructs, creatures that had been harvested from conquered worlds and repurposed. Flesh merged with technology, minds, overwritten with invasion protocols, bodies modified to serve as shock troops. They numbered in the hundreds, each one a war crime wrapped in tactical necessity. And coordinating everything floating above the ground on anti-gravity platforms, the commanders. Kalyuan drones' physical manifestation of the intelligence that had designed this assault. They possessed Brainiac's architectural signature, that combination of organic tissue and computational hardware that allowed for processing speeds biological brains couldn't achieve. The invasion force had expected resistance. They had deployed with overwhelming numbers, superior technology coordination protocols refined across dozens of successful planetary acquisitions. What they hadn't expected was the darkness. The shadow sea that covered Metropolis Crater had expanded. It now stretched for half a mile in every direction, a void that absorbed light and replaced it with substantial darkness. From that void, Sung JinWoo's army rose. Not hundreds, thousands. Shadow soldiers emerging in perfect formation ranks, extending beyond immediate visibility. They moved with unified purpose that suggested singular controlling intelligence. Each one was armored, positioned according to tactical doctrine that treated individual units as components of larger organism. The Kalyuan drones calculated immediately. Force assessment, threat analysis, probability matrices for victory conditions. Their invasion protocols had parameters for encountering unexpected resistance. Deploy measured response, escalate systematically, maintain resource efficiency while achieving objectives. They opened fire. Energy weapons discharged in coordinated volleys, enough firepower to vaporize a city block. The shadow soldiers met the assault without retreating. Some fell bodies dissolving under concentrated fire. But for each one destroyed the darkness, birthed 3 more. The invasion force's weapons were consuming their targets and producing multiplication. A Kalyuan drone recalculated. This violated expected parameters. Destruction should reduce enemy numbers. Instead, it was feeding enemy reproduction. The drone adjusted tactics, ordering kinetic weapons instead of energy-based. Physical ammunition couldn't be absorbed and converted the way energy could. The shadow soldiers adapted. They shifted formation using terrain for cover, employing suppression tactics that forced the invasion force to disperse fire. Concentrated volleys gave way to scattered shooting. Efficiency dropped. Resource expenditure increased without corresponding gains. Superman watched from the crater's western edge, the tactical portion of his mind, recognizing patterns he'd seen before. They're using asymmetric warfare, forcing the invasion force to waste ammunition on targets that can be replaced faster than they can be eliminated. Batman stood beside him, Cowl's sensors recording everything for later analysis. It's not just asymmetric. It's designed to exploit the invasion force's doctrine. They're programmed to achieve objectives through superior firepower and coordination. But those strategies fail when the opposition treats casualties as temporary setbacks. Wonder Woman's hand rested on her sword hilt, warrior instinct demanding engagement. We should strike while the invasion force is occupied. Hit them from a second vector, divide their attention. No. The word came from Constantine, who had materialized via teleportation circle, looking even more haggard than usual. We're meant to watch. That thing said it would demonstrate why our methodology fails. Interrupting the demonstration just proves we didn't learn the lesson. The battle escalated. Biological constructs charged forward, attempting to break shadow soldier lines through mass assault. They crashed into the darkness like waves hitting stone. Some broke through. Most were torn apart by coordinated shadow fire. The ones that fell didn't stay down. Darkness seeped into their wounds, converting dead tissue into shadow matter, assimilating the biological components into new soldiers. It's harvesting them. Cyborg said sensors, struggling to process data that violated multiple conservation laws. Every casualty the invasion force takes, every weapon they expend, every piece of technology they deploy, all of it becomes raw material for the Shadow Army. Flash vibrated in place, watching the battle expand. This is what Brother Eye was warning about. Resource conversion. The more they fight, the stronger he gets. It's not a battle. It's a trap. The Kalyuan drones recognized the trap. They recalculated again, running through invasion protocols that had succeeded on 47 different worlds. None of the protocols accounted for an opponent that converted combat losses into tactical advantages. They needed new approach. They deployed the heavy assets. The tower's deployment bays opened wider. What emerged made the previous forces look like reconnaissance units. Siege platforms, floating fortresses armed with weapons designed to crack planetary shields. Biological titans, creatures the size of buildings, bodies grown in vats and programmed for maximum destructive output. And coordinating them, a command-class Kalyuan intelligence processing power sufficient to manage planetary occupation logistics. The siege weapons opened fire. Not scattered volleys, but concentrated bombardment. They targeted the Shadow Army's formation centers, attempting to disrupt coordination through overwhelming force applied to critical points. The darkness responded. It didn't scatter or retreat. It deepened. The Shadow Sea became three-dimensional, rising into walls, forming structures that intercepted bombardment and dissipated energy through volume rather than resistance. The siege weapons poured firepower into shadows that absorbed it, like ocean accepting rain. Superman's fists clenched. We need to end this before it reaches the city proper. Civilians are still in the outer districts. Batman pulled up tactical map, overlaying it with population density data. Estimated civilian count within potential combat radius 4,200. Evacuation order was issued, but compliance is low. People don't trust government directives anymore. Then we evacuate them ourselves. Wonder Woman was already moving. League mobilizes for civilian extraction, while the Shadow Monarch handles invasion force. She had taken 3 steps when the air itself changed quality. Temperature dropped 15 degrees in 2 seconds. Pressure increased as if atmosphere had achieved greater density. Every combatant on the battlefield, shadow soldier, war machine, biological construct, simultaneously stopped fighting, not ceased fire. Stopped, frozen in position as if time had paused for everything except the watching heroes. From the Shadow Sea's center, something rose, not emerging, rising, as if it had always been there, simply choosing this moment to manifest fully. The form was humanoid, but scaled beyond human proportion. 10 feet tall frame, suggesting strength that transcended biological limits. Wings spread from its back, each one constructed of layered shadow that suggested feathers, but moved like liquid architecture. The armor it wore seemed grown rather than forged, seamless integration of protection and form. Where face should be visible, a helm that revealed only burning points of light, eyes that registered awareness but no mercy. In its hands, twin blades curved like sickles, scaled for giants' use. The edges caught no light. They consumed it. Space around the blades appeared to bend slightly, as if reality found their presence uncomfortable. Constantine took one look and stumbled backward. Oh, bloody hell. That's not a soldier. That's a marshal, a general. Whatever word you want to use, it means the same thing everything we've seen until now was preliminary. That's the actual response. Bellion. The name appeared in Batman's mind without being spoken. Recognition that bypassed normal sensory input and imprinted directly on consciousness. Sung JinWoo's Grand Marshal. First shadow created from the Shadow Monarch's own power. Strongest warrior in the army that had consumed the 12 soldiers that had multiplied across the battlefield, that had turned invasion into harvest. Bellion moved, not walked. Simply existed in one position, then another, the intermediate space irrelevant. He appeared before the biological titan, a creature that stood 4 stories tall and massed enough to crush buildings through simple movement. The titan struck downward, arm the size of a train car, descending with force to pulverize bedrock. Bellion caught the arm, not blocking, catching. One hand positioned beneath the descending mass, halting its momentum completely. The titan's bioengineered muscles strained. Reinforced bone structure cracked under the pressure of its own arrested force. Bellion's expression didn't change. He simply stood there holding a multi-ton limb, motionless in defiance of physics. Then he moved the blade. One strike. Horizontal arc. The edge passed through the titan's torso at chest level. No resistance. No catching on bone or dense tissue. The blade simply passed through and the titan separated. Upper body slid from lower body. Both sections began dissolving before they hit the ground. Flesh converting to shadow matter mass and structure transforming into new soldiers. By the time the pieces would have landed, they had become 50 additional shadow troops, already armed, already positioned, already executing coordinated fire on the next nearest threat. "Sweet Christ," Flash whispered. He didn't kill it, he recycled it. Bellion moved to the next target. Siege platform floating fortress, armed with weapons that could sterilize continents. The platform's AI recognized threat priority, redirecting all weapon systems toward the approaching figure. Everything fired simultaneously: energy cannons, kinetic railguns, molecular disruptors, quantum destabilizers. Bellion's wings spread. The shadow feathers caught every projectile, every energy beam, every exotic particle designed to unmake matter at fundamental levels. The wings absorbed everything, then folded forward, redirecting the captured energy back toward its source. The siege platform exploded. Not from its own weapons, from concentrated return fire using its own ammunition. The detonation would have vaporized everything within 200 meters. The darkness caught the explosion, contained it, compressed it down to a sphere of annihilation 20 feet across, then absorbed that sphere entirely. The energy that should have devastated the battlefield instead became fuel for shadow expansion. Superman watched the display of power with growing alarm. This is beyond what we've faced before. This isn't just tactical superiority. This is absolute dominance, Batman finished. It's not fighting to win. It's demonstrating that winning was never in question. The entire invasion force is being processed like raw material. The Kalyuan Command Intelligence recognized critical failure state. All tactical models indicated 0 probability of successful invasion. It initiated emergency protocols, full retreat, abandonment of deployed assets, closure of gateway before more resources could be lost. Bellion appeared at the gateway's threshold, not running to intercept, simply present at the exact position required to prevent closure. His blades crossed, creating an X barrier in the dimensional aperture. The command intelligence attempted to force closure anyway. Reality strained against shadow-forged metal. For 3 seconds the contest held. Dimensional mechanics versus manifested will. The gateway shattered. Not closed. Shattered. The Kalyuan technology that had forced the breach buckled under pressure. It wasn't designed to accommodate. The tower began collapsing its foundation in other dimensional space, now severed. Belian didn't move. He stood in position as the structure came down around him, tons of alien alloy and exotic circuitry crashing through the space he occupied. The debris passed through him, through his position, through the shadow that comprised his form. He remained untouched. When the dust settled, when the last piece of the tower had finished falling, Belian surveyed the battlefield. Every invasion force asset had been neutralized, destroyed, or converted. The Kalyuan drones lay scattered across the crater, their processing centers dark, their invasion protocols terminated permanently. The Shadow Army stood at attention. Thousands of soldiers in perfect formation, not celebrating, not showing any emotion, simply present, awaiting instruction. Belian turned toward the watching heroes. His gaze swept across them, Superman hovering above Wonder Woman's hand on her sword. Batman analyzing from multiple angles. Flash vibrating with nervous energy, Green Lantern forming constructs on instinct, Constantine backing away slowly. When he spoke, the voice resonated like tectonic plates grinding together in the deep earth. This was restraint. The words hung in the air. Simple statement of fact that carried implications too vast to fully process immediately. What you witnessed was controlled response to measured threat. Proportional application of force. Strategic deployment of resources. Belian gestured at the destroyed invasion force. They came expecting resistance appropriate to weakened world. They received education in why that assumption was fatal. Superman descended, landing 50 feet from Belian. Close enough for conversation. Far enough for tactical response, if necessary. You're threatening us, making a show of force to intimidate. No. Belian's interruption carried no anger, just correction. Threatening requires intention to harm. I have no such intention. I am demonstrating capability. Establishing fact. You believed coordination and superior firepower would overcome our presence. You watched that belief fail when applied by forces more sophisticated than yourselves. Wonder Woman stepped forward. One warrior, no matter how powerful, cannot hold territory, cannot maintain occupation, cannot. Belian raised one blade. The Shadow Sea responded. Every soldier in the formation moved simultaneously, executing maneuvers that transformed them from army into something else. They divided into battalions, established perimeters, created supply lines using shadow matter as resource, built fortifications that appeared structurally sound despite being constructed from darkness. In 30 seconds, the Shadow Army had transformed from combat force into occupation infrastructure. I am not one warrior. Belian's voice carried certainty that brooked no argument. I am command structure. The soldiers are the army. The army is the mechanism. And the mechanism transforms combat victory into sustained control. Your assumption that numerical superiority matters fails to recognize that we are not counting individual units. We are measuring systemic capability. Batman's tactical computer ran projections based on observed performance. The results came back with probability assessments he'd never seen before. If they committed to full planetary occupation, conventional resistance would fail within 96 hours. Nuclear response would produce casualties they'd convert into additional forces. Biological weapons would fail against targets that don't require biological processes. Chemical weapons, same result. You're saying we couldn't stop them, Cyborg said, though his tone suggested he'd already reached that conclusion. I'm saying we'd be helping them by fighting. Batman pulled up the resource conversion data. Every weapon deployed, every soldier committed, every tactical asset engaged, all of it becomes material they can repurpose. Fighting doesn't reduce their numbers. It feeds their growth. Constantine laughed, the sound carrying edge of hysteria he usually kept buried. It's the perfect war machine, built specifically to counter the exact type of resistance Earth produces. We built our entire defensive doctrine around mutually assured destruction, overwhelming retaliation, scorched Earth as last resort. And every single one of those strategies just makes this thing stronger. Bellion's wings folded against his back. The Shadow Army held position, but relaxed from combat readiness to disciplined rest. Now you understand. The demonstration is complete. You came to this encounter believing heroic courage and superior coordination would carry the day. You've learned those attributes are insufficient against opponents who treat your strengths as exploitable resources. What does your master want? Superman's question carried the weariness of someone who had argued from strength, only to discover strength was the wrong currency. If this was all demonstration, what's the actual demand? Bellion's gaze shifted, looking past Superman to something in the distance. He comes to deliver that answer himself. I was sent to establish credibility, to ensure when he speaks, you listen without filtering through assumptions of superiority. The shadow sea parted. Sung JinWoo walked through coat moving in wind that touched nothing else expression, carrying same neutral observation it had held since first appearance. He surveyed the destroyed invasion force, the converted resources, the watching heroes. When he spoke, his voice carried across the battlefield with perfect clarity despite conversational volume. That invasion was drawn here by systems you built to feel safe. Brother Eye scanning soul data, surveillance networks monitoring for threats, weapons platforms designed to enforce peace through superior firepower. All of it broadcasting signal to predators who hunt worlds exactly like yours. He gestured at the ruined Kalyuan Tower. They came because you made yourselves visible, made yourselves appear vulnerable, made yourselves look like resources waiting to be harvested. And they would have succeeded because your defensive doctrine is built around strategies that work against conventional threats, not against enemies who welcome your escalation. Superman's jaw tightened. If you're here to lecture about mistakes, you've made your point. Now tell us what you want, so we can negotiate terms. I want nothing from you. Sung JinWoo's expression didn't change. I'm here to ensure the mechanism attracting these invasions gets neutralized. The contaminated surveillance system, the residual Brainiac code, the infrastructure that keeps broadcasting your location and status to everything capable of listening. Batman stepped forward. You're talking about destroying Brother Eye. Yes. That system is critical for planetary defense coordination. Without it, we lose early warning capability, threat assessment, rapid response coordination. You lose the tool that draws predators to your door. Sung JinWoo's tone remained factual. The choice is whether you prefer feeling secure while attracting extinction-level threats or accepting reduced surveillance capability in exchange for not being constant target. Wonder Woman's hand remained on her sword. And if we refuse, if we decide the risk is acceptable, then I destroy the system anyway. And you fight me the same way you fought the invasion force, with the same results. His gaze swept across all of them. Or you escalate beyond conventional means. Deploy weapons that sterilize continents, and I convert those weapons into additional resources. The outcome is predetermined. Only the casualty count varies. Flash vibrated faster, anxiety manifesting in increased frequency. This is extortion. Comply or face annihilation. How is that different from what the invasion force was attempting? Invasion force came to conquer. I came to conclude. Sung JinWoo looked toward the crater's edge, where Metropolis's ruins stretched into the distance. This world has been at war with itself for a decade. Superhuman conflicts, regime rise and fall, infrastructure of violence that persists regardless of who administers it. And now you've built systems that advertise that violence to cosmic predators. The cycle needs to break. I'm here to ensure it does, by taking away our defensive capability, Superman said. By leaving us vulnerable to the next threat. By removing the system that makes you high-priority target. Lower your signal profile. Stop trying to achieve perfect security through perfect surveillance. Accept that some threats can't be predicted or prepared for. The stranger's eyes held something that might have been weariness. Or keep your systems. Keep broadcasting. And face invasion after invasion until one succeeds, or your world exhausts itself fighting. Batman's tactical mind worked through the scenario trees. Every branch that included keeping Brother Eye led to continued cosmic attention. Every branch that included destroying it required accepting reduced defensive capability. There was no option that provided security without cost. How long do we have to decide? Batman asked. JinWoo glanced at Bellion. The Grand Marshal's expression suggested awareness of something beyond normal perception. Approximately 8 minutes before additional responses arrive. The invasion force's distress signal was transmitted before I terminated their command intelligence. Others will investigate. If they find active Brother Eye system, they'll add your world to priority acquisition lists. 8 minutes to decide planetary defense policy, Constantine muttered. No pressure then. The decision is already made, Superman said. His tone carried finality that suggested he'd moved past uncertainty into commitment. We keep our systems. We improve them. We find way to mask the signal or encrypt the data or... You repeat the pattern, JinWoo interrupted. Technological solution to problem created by technology. More systems to protect systems, more surveillance to monitor surveillance. The cycle that creates the vulnerability you're trying to eliminate. Then what do you suggest? Wonder Woman demanded. That we go back to pre-industrial defensive posture, trust in individual heroes to respond to each crisis manually. I suggest you accept limitation. Acknowledge that perfect security is illusion. That attempting to achieve it creates new vulnerabilities. That sometimes the best defense is appearing less threatening. The stranger's gaze remained steady. Or you fight, escalate, deploy everything you have, and discover whether your weapons are sufficient to stop what 8 minutes from now begins to arrive. The choice crystallized. Philosophical debate given immediate deadline. Abstract principles forced into concrete decision. And somewhere in the dark between stars, things that fed on worlds like Earth adjusted their trajectories, drawn by distress signals and the scent of civilization ready for harvest. The counting had reached critical threshold. The reckoning was minutes away. And the price of certainty was about to be demonstrated in terms that would leave no room for interpretation. The demonstration was concluding. The education would be written in whatever decision the heroes made in the next 8 minutes. Choose systems and face what systems attracted. Or choose limitation and face uncertainty without safety net. Either way, the world they knew was ending. Only the manner of that ending remained to be determined. So in the end, JinWoo did not come to injustice to conquer and enslave. Nor did he replace its rulers, rewrite its laws, or claim its future or freedom. But his arrival changed everything the inhabitants of injustice knows. For the first time, escalation no longer guaranteed dominance. He showed to everyone that power is no longer a tool to solve any problem. Abusing it will only do more harm than good. Although Sung did not dismantle the machinery of injustice, he exposed its limits, proving that endless control only feeds endless war, and that war, when allowed to grow unchecked, eventually belongs to no one, not even gods. And so the world of injustice did not become freer. It became quieter. That knowledge lingered long after he left, leaving nothing behind. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And be sure to turn on notifications so you won't miss our future videos. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.